After going through the information in the last 2 jade slips, the proprietress nodded her head. Many thanks. Yuan Rueda replied. It's within my duties. As the proprietress fiddled with the jade slips, she asked, how about the previous owner of this shop? Have you made him suffer any grievances? Yuan Rueda said with a smile. I've paid him 20% more than the market value of his shop. The money is enough for him to buy a new shop in a different location with a tidy profit left over. He couldn't be happier, so I'm sure he doesn't feel aggrieved at all. Very good, a gratified proprietress nodded her head. Yuan Rueda bent his back slightly. Madam, is there anything else you need me to do for you? If not, I'll take my leave and report to my higher-ups now. Do you want to stay overnight here before leaving? Many thanks for your concern, madam. But I've stayed here for quite a few days already, so it's best I head back quickly. I won't make you stay then. Old Bai, please see him off, the proprietress ordered. With a smile, Bai Qi stepped forward and extended his hand. Please. Farewell, madam. Yuan Rueda saluted her before striding out of the shop. After he was gone, the proprietress looked around and nodded. It's a good place. Bai Qi approached her. Proprietress, are we going to reopen our inn here? The proprietress walked around and asked casually, What's wrong? A glint flashed across Bai Qi's eyes as he said with a grin. There's nothing wrong with it. As long as you're around, we're fine with anywhere. The proprietress scoffed, Do you think I have no idea what's on your mind? All of you are bored after traveling the void for so long, so you're eager to have fun in this lively place. I'm warning you now, all of you can have fun, but don't invite any trouble or slack off on your work. Otherwise, I won't let you off. We won't, Bai Qi assured her before he turned his head to wink at the chef and accountant. He could barely contain his excitement. There's dust. The proprietress wiped the armrest of a chair and took a look at her finger before rubbing it off on Bai Qi's shoulder. Then she turned and made a circular movement with her finger. Get everything here changed by tomorrow. Yes, Bai Qi replied respectfully. The proprietress covered her mouth and yawned. I'm tired, so I'll take a rest now. All of you have a good night's sleep as we start work tomorrow. Until tomorrow then, proprietress. Bai Qi, the chef, and the accountant stood in a row and watched her enter a room. Xianxia was stunned for a moment before joining them. The proprietress shot them a glance as she had seen through their thoughts. After flicking her sleeve, she shuffled into a room and said, Xianxia, come with me. Instantly, Bai Qi and the others gazed at Xianxia with sympathetic looks on their faces. At that, Xianxia was speechless as well. He wanted to take the opportunity to explore the Star City, but he hadn't expected to be forced to stay in the shop by the proprietress. He wondered what she was up to. With a helpless look on his face, he watched as Bai Qi and the others ambled out of the shop with their arms around each other's shoulders. After a sigh, he shuffled towards the rear court. Hearing some noises from a room, he went over and knocked on the door. Then, the proprietress was heard saying, Come in. Xianxia pushed the door open, only to see that 2 maidservants were busy making the bed for the proprietress. What shocked him was that the wooden bed he had seen on the ship had been placed in this room now. Proprietress, what's wrong? Xianxia asked. He had been getting along with her pretty well for the past few months, as she had never found fault with him again after that incident. The proprietress was seated in front of a quaint desk as she raised her head and asked, You have an artifact that can conceal your figure and aura, right? Why are you asking this question all of a sudden? Xianxia was puzzled. Nevertheless, he couldn't hide it from her, as she had already noticed him when they were in the Golden Crow Divine Palace. Therefore, it was reasonable that she had this speculation. Upon that realization, he simply nodded his head. Let me have a look. The proprietress extended her hand. Hearing that, Xianxia summoned the shadowless veil and passed it to her. The proprietress took it with a faint smile on her face. Aren't you worried that I won't return it to you? Xianxia burst into laughter. Nonsense. There's no way you'd be interested in such a thing. Nothing is ever for certain. After finishing her words, the proprietress examined the veil and infused her power into it to probe it. A moment later, she nodded gently. This artifact itself is not bad. It should be able to prevent anyone below the mid-rank open heaven realm from seeing through it. Even mid-rank cultivators might neglect it if they're not careful enough. Xianxia gave her a thumbs up. The conclusion she had come up with was the same as what Du Rufeng had said. She was able to come to this conclusion by just probing the artifact without refining it, which went to show that her vision and insight were incredibly sharp. You were pretty brave to rely on this thing to make a fuss in the Golden Crow Divine Palace. The proprietress flashed a faint smile at him. Xianxia sighed. I was left with no choice at that time. I didn't even mean to enter that place. He was trapped in that hallway for no reason and then relied on his instincts to deal with the following issues. His actions were not intentional. Even the Golden Crow corpse was taken away by him by chance. Do you trust me? Xianxia looked at her doubtfully. He had no idea how to reply to her after he was asked such a question all of a sudden. The proprietress fiddled with the shadowless veil. If you trust me, let me keep this thing for now. I'll return it to you after some time. What is the woman up to? Although the shadowless veil was valuable, it wasn't worthy of her attention. After all, she was able to see through its concealment at a glance back then. Furthermore, after spending half a year together with her, Xianxia was convinced she wasn't someone who would snatch things from other people. After giving it a thought, Xianxia asked, "Can you tell me what you need this veil for?" "You'll find out when the time is right." After finishing her words, the proprietress directly put the shadowless veil away without getting his permission first. She didn't give him a chance to regret it. Upon seeing that, Xianxia became frustrated. He was weak now, so the shadowless veil was the most useful artifact he possessed currently. If it was really snatched by the proprietress, he would be heartbroken. However, there was nothing he could do as he was much weaker than she was. What's more, he still owed her more than 10 million open heaven pills, so for now he could only regard the veil as part of the repayment of his debt. Following her actions though, the proprietress fished out a box from her space ring and pushed it towards him. "Take it." "What is this?" A puzzled Xianxia gazed at her. "Open the box and see it for yourself." Since she had said as much, Xianxia stopped asking questions and picked it up. The box was neither heavy nor big, only about as wide and long as a chopstick, making him wonder what was inside it. After opening the box, Xianxia was startled by what he saw. There was a true-to-life mask lying in the box. It was so delicate that it was as though it was really taken from a person's face. Apparently, it was a product from a Grandmaster artifact refiner. Upon picking it up, Xianxia realized that the mask was practically weightless and as thin as a cicada's wings. Xianxia wasn't someone who had just started cultivating, so although it was the first time he saw this mask, he had a speculation about what this artifact's uses were. 7 faces. The proprietress folded her hands and rested her chin on them as she looked smilingly at Xianxia. This treasure is called 7 faces, which means that it can transform into 7 different faces. More importantly, it can even alter the user's aura, voice, and figure, making it truly useful for concealment. It's something I obtained a long time ago. Xianxia's eyes brightened when he heard this. He had heard about masks that could help change a person's appearance. However, those items could only alter a person's physical appearance so others could easily see through such a disguise. On the other hand, 7 faces could alter a person's aura, voice, and figure, which was truly incredible. In other words, it could completely turn the user into someone else. This treasure has the same limitations as yours. Can't block powerful cultivators from probing you. If that person has a strong divine sense, they can still see through your disguise. With that said, it can prevent low-rank open heaven realm cultivators from spying on you. In disbelief, Xianxia gulped and said, "Proprietress, why did you take it? You're too weak right now, so you need an artifact like this to protect yourself." "You shouldn't have." Xianxia appeared elated. Despite what he had said, he was unwilling to put it down. In fact, the shadowless veil was more than enough to ensure his safety. However, if he also had the help of 7 faces, he could be unrestrained when carrying out some tasks. At that instant, he was eager to go back to his room with the artifact and refine it to experience its abstrusity. Nonetheless, he still said, "This is too expensive. I don't think I deserve it." The proprietress kept a smile on her face. 5 million. Xianxia became startled before he turned to stare at her. "What do you mean? Why did she mention 5 million all of a sudden?" The proprietress explained, "I'll lend it to you until you become an open heaven realm master. The fee is 5 million open heaven pills." An enraged Xianxia bellowed, "You dare still say this isn't a bandit's inn?" He had the urge to strike her beautiful, smiling face with the 7 faces in his hand. It was inconceivable that he was charged 5 million for a mask that he would have to return after he became an open heaven realm master. Why didn't she just become a professional thief instead? It was no wonder that she kept looking smilingly at him as though she was up to no good. He regretted deeply the fact that he was actually moved just now. The proprietress said lightly, "Whether or not you want to borrow this artifact, it's up to you." An exasperated Xianxia put down the box and turned around to leave. On the other hand, the proprietress watched him leave with a smile on her face as she tilted her head and rested her chin on one hand. 3 breaths later, Xianxia stormed into the room and grabbed the box, shooting the proprietress a glare before leaving again. The proprietress shouted from behind, "It's 16.2 million now." Hearing that, Xianxia staggered as he felt extremely bitter. It hadn't been long since he arrived in the outer universe, but he had already owed the proprietress a huge amount of money. How long would it take before he could clear this debt? Behind him, the proprietress could be heard laughing heartily, which showed that she was pleased with what she had achieved today. A bitter Xianxia found a room in the inner court and pushed the door open. The room was well decorated, and it was complete with every basic facility he needed. Sitting on the bed, he suppressed his fury and examined the box. Although 5 million was indeed a lot of money, 7 faces was probably more beneficial to him than the shadowless veil at this point. If it was used at the right time and in the right location, the benefits couldn't be gauged in mere monetary terms. Therefore, despite the fact that the proprietress was a black-hearted woman, Xianxia still had no choice but to borrow this artifact from her. After closing the door, Xianxia took out 7 faces from the box, and with the help of the dim light, he carefully pasted the mask on his face in front of a mirror. It was so comfortable that it was as though nothing had been placed on his face at all, surprising him once more at its thinness and lightness. However, his face didn't change as he hadn't refined the artifact yet. Then, he sat down on the bed with his legs crossed and emptied his mind before circulating his strength to refine it. A few days later, Xianxia, who was still refining 7 faces, suddenly heard a series of rapid footsteps approaching his room. Following that, the door was pushed open from the outside as Bai Chi stuck in his head, "Brat, it's time to start working. Come to the lobby now." Xianxia grunted and took 7 faces away from his face. After storing it away, he shuffled out of his room. A few days had passed, but he still hadn't fully refined 7 faces, so he couldn't activate its power yet. Nevertheless, this process couldn't be rushed. Therefore, he would just do it slowly over time. In comparison, he was more curious about why the proprietress had decided to come all the way to this star city. Supposedly, after First Inn was destroyed, she should have rebuilt it in the same spot. What was her purpose for coming here? With that said, it had nothing to do with him. Presently, he was just a shop hand hired by the inn, so he just had to obey the proprietress' orders. Upon reaching the lobby, he realized that everyone from First Inn was already there, and he was the only one who was late. Hurriedly, he stood beside Bai Chi and scanned the surroundings. Everything in the lobby had been changed as all the tables and chairs appeared brand new. They must have bought new ones over the past few days. After he joined the group, the proprietress started giving them a pep talk. There was nothing special, as she just said that the previous inn was destroyed and they had to settle down here. Although they had come to a new place, the things they had to do remained unchanged. Therefore, she hoped that everyone could work hard and move forward together. Certainly, they all agreed to it. Then, the proprietress told Xianxia and Bai Chi to hang the signboard of First Inn above the front entrance, which signaled that they were officially open for business. Seeing that, Xianxia was speechless. First Inn was famous throughout the outer universe, but no one had come to congratulate them on the first day of reopening, which made them look somewhat pitiful. With that said, the proprietress certainly didn't invite anyone to come over. After all, it had only been a few days since they arrived at this place, so they didn't have the time for such minor things. Furthermore, as long as the signboard of First Inn was hung, they didn't have to worry about not having customers. First Inn had been around for thousands of years, and they were now open in this star city where lots of people had gathered together and information could be spread around quickly. If anyone wanted to purchase information, they would have to come to First Inn. Not long after the signboard was hung, a thin and shifty-looking middle-aged man appeared outside the doors. As though he couldn't believe that First Inn had opened a shop in this lively city, he kept looking around and beating around the bush. It wasn't until the proprietress revealed her sixth-order open heaven realm aura that this man was finally convinced. Then he requested a private room to have a chat with the proprietress. It wasn't certain what she was worried about, but she had brought Bai Qi and Yang Kai with her. The middle-aged man was here to buy information. It wasn't a top secret, as he was just looking for the whereabouts of a certain type of precious treasure. After the proprietress revealed the information to him, he became ecstatic and thanked her repeatedly. Following that, he put down some money and sauntered out of the inn. An amazed Yang Kai had no idea how much money the person had left behind, but he reckoned that it must have been quite a sum. The proprietress could earn lots of money by just selling information, making Yang Kai envious of this kind of business that required such low operating costs. After the customer was gone, the proprietress respectively gave Bai Qi and Yang Kai a jade slip and parted her lips. "Have a look." Then, she took a sip of the tea. A doubtful Yang Kai took it and scanned it with his divine sense, only to realize that the information in the jade slip was quite bizarre. The jade slip contained information such as shop names and their locations in the Star City. Besides that, it also included information such as the names of the shopkeepers and their cultivation. Recalling the jade slips given to the proprietress by Yuan Rueda some time ago, Yang Kai reckoned that this was the same information. Puzzled, he stared at the proprietress and asked, "Who are they?" The proprietress lifted her head and shot him a glance. "Just like you. They owe us money." An amazed Yang Kai said, "There are people who have the guts to owe us money?" Firstin was in the business that bought and sold information, and their customers had to pay in pills on delivery of service. How was it possible that so many people owed the money? To the side, Bai Qi landed a kick on Yang Kai, which prompted him to turn his head. "What?" The corner of Bai Qi's mouth twitched as he put on a hollow laugh. An exasperated proprietress explained, "Our Firstin branch being destroyed has something to do with the great forces behind these shops, and I've already said that I will never let them off." Yang Kai became startled for a moment before he came to his senses. "You mean?" The great forces behind these shops were the ones who had made a move in Firstin. "Naturally. Otherwise, why would I have come all the way here?" With a frown, Yang Kai asked, "What do we have to do?" "Demand payment." The proprietress tapped on the table and said slowly, "Collect 10 million from every force listed." At that instant, Yang Kai felt an ache in his head. The reason he owed the proprietress 10 million was that the inn's destruction was partially his fault. So it wasn't outrageous to demand 10 million from every one of those great forces that had participated in that fight that day. However, he was just an Emperor Realm Master, while the people who had made a fuss in the inn previously were either from first-class cave heavens and paradises, or second-class great forces with mid-rank open heaven realm masters assuming command. Would they even bother to meet a nobody like him, let alone deliver compensation? The proprietress seemed to understand his concerns, so she said, "Debts must be repaid and we're in the right to collect it from them. It would be best if they're willing to pay, but if they refuse, I don't mind making a fuss at their headquarters." A frustrated Yang Kai said, "Proprietress, if I'm not mistaken, some of the people who made a scene in the inn are from cave heavens and paradises." "How?" The proprietress cut him off by saying, "I'll personally deal with them, so you don't have to worry about it. You'll handle the rest." Then, she shot them a glance. "This is a matter which reflects upon our inn's reputation, so don't make any mistakes. Proprietress may rest assured. I will definitely complete this task without embarrassing you." Bai Qi cupped his fists and replied loudly. Yang Kai gulped down what he was about to say as the proprietress gazed at him and asked, "What about you?" She was forcing Yang Kai to make his stance clear. So he said through clenched teeth, "I'll do my best. I've never collected debts before, so I'm not familiar with it." The proprietress said, "You currently owe me 16.2 million open heaven pills. And 5% of the debt you collect will go towards your repayment." "Seriously?" Yang Kai's gaze brightened. 5% might sound like a small number, but if he could collect 10 million, 500,000 would go towards his debt. There were about 20 shops listed in the jade slip given to him by the proprietress, so if he could collect debts from all of them, he would pay off 10 million all at once. "I'm always serious when it comes to money." The proprietress nodded. In a far more forceful manner than before, Yang Kai cupped his fists. "Rest assured. This Yang will collect those debts regardless of what it takes." A satisfied proprietress nodded her head and waved her hand. Go now. At the same time, Yang Kai and Bai Qi turned around with their gazes filled with murderous intent, as though they were determined to achieve their goals at any cost. After leaving the room, Bai Qi asked, Why do you owe her 5 million more all of a sudden? Wasn't it supposed to be 11.2 million? 10 million was what Yang Kai already owed, and 1.2 million was the fee for leaving his imprint at those universe temples. Bai Qi was aware of all that, but the extra 5 million puzzled him. Yang Kai directly dodged the question by saying, Old Bai, I reckon that we'd better come up with a way to collect these debts first. The proprietress had lent him 7 faces, but Yang Kai felt that he'd better keep it a secret for now. Bai Qi replied, I already have an idea. Come to my room for now so we can plan our strategy. Then he took Yang Kai's arm and lugged him away. After they entered the room and sat down, Yang Kai asked, Have you collected debts before? Bai Qi shook his head. No, it's my first time. In disbelief, Yang Kai widened his eyes. How do you make such a bold claim when it's your first time? Bai Qi just claimed that he would definitely complete the task. A nonchalant Bai Qi replied, What is there to worry about? We have the proprietress behind us, so we'll just demand repayment from them first. If we can't do it, we'll just ask the proprietress to make a move. I'm sure they wouldn't dare to default on the debts then. At that, Yang Kai was speechless. Bai Qi could carry out such a plan, but he couldn't. The proprietress had said that 5% of the debts he collected would go towards repaying his own debts, so he wanted to collect as much money as possible. It would be pointless if he had to ask the proprietress to do it for him. Bai Qi went on to say, Whatever the case, we have to be polite before demanding any repayment. Everyone we're trying to collect from is a famous figure in their own right, and they might not be aware of what had happened. It's inappropriate if we just go over there and demand money from them. Yang Kai nodded lightly. Why don't we send them a notice of debt first? In the notice, we'll explain to them what happened and the purpose of our visit. We'll see how things go before taking further action. That's a great idea. Let's do it. In that case, we have to get a faith token from proprietress. Otherwise, why would anyone believe we're from First In? That's easy. We'll look for proprietress later. After their brief discussion, the two got busy as they fished out blank jade slips and began writing notices of debt. Just like what they had agreed, they jotted down what had happened and their purpose of visit in those notices. The language they used was euphemistic and gentle. Although it was to demand repayment, it wouldn't make anyone feel loathsome. In fact, 19 shops were listed in Yang Kai's jade slip, so he had made 19 notices of debt in total. Certainly, the number of notices Bai Qi had made was similar. After they were done, they cross-checked one another's jade slips to make sure that there was nothing wrong before going to ask the proprietress for a faith token. A generous proprietress directly gave each of them a jade token the size of a palm with the characters First In engraved on them. After they got everything ready, they stepped out of the inn and cupped their fists at one another. Then they wished each other swift success and parted ways as though they were determined to not come back unless they managed to complete their great crusade. Yang Kai strolled along the intricate streets as he took a glance at every single shop and experienced the local customs, which helped broaden his horizons. Half a day later, he stepped into a tea house and ordered a pot of tea before waiting in silence. When the shop hand served him the tea, Yang Kai stopped him and said, "May I ask you a question?" The shop hand politely replied, "Please." Yang Kai said, "It's my first time here, so I'm not familiar with this place. Can you recommend someone who can take me for a tour around this city?" The shop hand asked, "Are you looking for a guide?" "That's right. You found the right person then. I do have someone in mind, but I'm not sure if she'll meet your requirements." "Please bring her to meet me," Yang Kai replied gently. "Good. Please give me a moment," the shop hand said. As Yang Kai looked out the window, he enjoyed the tea and waited patiently. Although the jade slip given to him by the proprietress contained all sorts of information about the 19 shops, he was totally unfamiliar with this city. Despite the fact that he had the jade slip, he had no idea where to look for those shops, which was why he came to a tea house to hire a guide. Now, it seemed that he had made the right decision. No matter the city, tea houses and restaurants were where people from all walks of life gathered together. so it was easy to look for a guide from one of these places. With a local guide leading the way, it would be easier for him to look for those shops. It was a necessary expense to help him achieve his goal quicker. Soon after, the shop hand returned with someone. Xianxia lifted his head and realized that the newcomer was a woman who appeared to be in her early 30s with a curvy figure. She appeared quite charming. Her twin peaks were especially pronounced. However, there was a cautious smile on her face, and she appeared to be apprehensive. Standing behind the shop hand, she looked anxiously at Xianxia. Her cultivation was excellent as she seemed to be at the peak of the Emperor realm. However, Xianxia couldn't detect any condensed aura of Dao from her. In other words, she hadn't condensed her Dao seal yet. It wasn't surprising, as at least 90% of Emperor realm masters couldn't condense their own Dao seals, spending their entire lives achieving nothing great. The shop hand approached Xianxia and spoke to him in his ear. "Sir, she's a local who is familiar with the city. Are you fine with her? If not, I'll get you a different one." Xianxia lifted his head, whereupon the woman saluted him and said in a small voice, "Greetings, sir." Her voice was soft and gentle. Without looking at her face, one would have thought that she was a young woman in her early 20s. Xianxia raised his hand and passed her the jade slip. "Do you know how to get to these places?" After taking it, the woman scanned it with her divine sense and nodded, "Yes. With our current location as the starting point, plan a route that will take me the shortest time to visit each of these places. Engrave it in the jade slip and show me." "Yes." The woman immediately got to work. Soon, she respectfully returned the jade slip with both hands. "Sir, please have a look." After taking it, Xianxia scanned it and realized that some information had been added and the 19 shops had also been rearranged in sequence. "Are you a local?" Xianxia stared at her and asked. The woman pressed her lips together and replied, "This mistress was born in this city and has never left it before." Xianxia nodded and shifted his attention to the shop hand. "I'll hire her." Then he tossed 2 open heaven pills at the shop hand. The shop hand took them and became elated. "Many thanks, sir. I'll take my leave now." As he turned around, he hinted at her with his gaze to motion for her to do her best. After the shop hand was gone, Xianxia gazed at the woman and said, "Have a seat." The woman hesitated for a moment, but she reckoned that she looked too conspicuous just standing in front of him. So after thanking him, she took a seat. Xianxia filled her cup with tea and asked, "What's your name?" She hurriedly replied, "This mistress is Luohai." After a nod, Xianxia introduced himself. "My name is Xianxia. I've hired you to take me to some places, but my task can't be completed in just 1 or 2 days, so you best be prepared. During this period of time, you have to be ready whenever I call for your help." Luohai quickly replied, "There's no problem. This mistress is a single woman with no family members, so there's nothing else I have to attend to." A surprised Xianxia asked, "Aren't you a local here? Since she was born in this place, why didn't she have any family members?" A bashful Luohai explained, "Although I was born in the city, I have no idea who my parents are. I was adopted as a child and my adoptive mother passed away 700 years ago." Xianxia couldn't help feeling sorry for her. "You're quite pitiful." In response, Luohai smiled demurely. "What's your rate?" Xianxia changed the topic. Luohai replied, 2 open heaven pills a day." Then she carefully examined Xianxia, and upon seeing that he frowned, she hurriedly offered a lower rate. "I'm fine with 3 pills every 2 days as well." Hearing that, Xianxia realized that she had misunderstood him. He frowned not because he thought it was expensive, but because he felt that the rate was overly cheap. After all, he had just tipped the shop hand with 2 open heaven pills. However, he soon recalled that when he was a worker in Seven Wonders Land in the past, he only received 3 pills every year. Although there were other ways to make additional income, an ordinary worker would only receive 20 to 30 pills every year on average. In comparison, Luohai charging 2 pills a day couldn't be considered quite expensive. The reason Xianxia felt it was cheap was that he had stayed by the proprietress side for too long. Presently, he owed her 16.2 million open heaven pills, so when compared to such an astronomical number, 2 or 3 pills were basically negligible. "I'll pay you 3 pills a day. Be ready at all times." Luohai's gaze brightened as she rose from the chair and saluted him. "Many thanks, sir." Seeing that Xianxia's cup was empty, she quickly poured him more tea. Xianxia nodded gently as he thought that this woman had sharp vision and a commendable demeanor. Judging from how cautious she was, she seemed to be an honest yet prudent person. Therefore, he didn't have to worry about anything when hiring her. After they finished drinking the tea, they left the tea house together. Luo Hai led the way and passed through several streets before stopping in front of a shop. Xianxia looked up and saw Gathering Virtue Emporium on the signboard. If he wasn't mistaken, Gathering Virtue Emporium was a business of 9 stars paradise, which was one of the 72 paradises. It was a first-class great force in the 3,000 worlds that had numerous high-rank open heaven cultivators. Xianxia gritted his teeth as it was certainly difficult to demand repayment from a shop backed by one of the paradises. However, since he had come to this place, he had to give it a try at least. Gathering Virtue Emporium lived up to its name as a business sponsored by one of the 72 paradises, as it was much larger than the shops nearby. Moreover, a lot of customers could be seen patronizing the shop. It wasn't certain what kind of business it did, but with so many customers, they must earn a lot of money. "Sir, do you want this mistress to accompany you?" Luo Hai asked in a hushed and shaking voice. Xianxia turned to look at her and realized that she had turned pale, and she subconsciously clenched the hem of her clothes, which suggested that she was nervous. Although it had only been a short time since they met, Xianxia could see that she was a self-abased woman who had always been at the bottom of the social hierarchy in the Star City. Apparently, she hadn't been to such a high-end shop before, which was why she felt nervous. "There's no need for that. Wait here for me." Xianxia shook his head. Luo Hai was evidently relieved, then she pursed her lips. "Sir, I wish you success." Although she had no idea why Xianxia decided to come here, she reckoned that it wouldn't be wrong to wish him well. After a gentle nod, Xianxia turned around, placed his hands behind his back, and shuffled confidently into the building. Upon entering the shop, he saw a shop boy passionately approaching him, and without beating around the bush, he fished out a notice of debt, which he had prepared earlier. "I'm looking for the shopkeeper." Upon hearing that, the shop boy was startled. Although he was just a general worker in the shop, he still technically belonged to 9 stars paradise, a point of pride for him. In all the years he worked here, he had never seen someone as arrogant as Xianxia, who directly demanded to see the shopkeeper. It wasn't easy to see the shopkeeper, who would only personally greet certain wealthy patrons, and Xianxia didn't look like he had a lot of money. After doubtfully taking the jade slip, the shop boy scanned it with his divine sense and immediately straightened his face. It was only then that he realized that Xianxia was from the famous First Inn, so he said solemnly, "Wait a moment. I'll inform the shopkeeper about your visit now." Then, he turned around and walked towards the back of the shop. While Xianxia was waiting, he took a stroll around the floor and realized that this place engaged in many kinds of businesses. All sorts of goods could be found here, including materials for alchemy and artifact refining, as well as finished products. Whenever he picked up something, a shop boy would come over and passionately introduce the product to him. A moment later, the first shop boy approached Xianxia and extended his hand. "The shopkeeper will see you now." Since Xianxia was from First Inn, he believed no one would dare to reject meeting him. After a nod, Xianxia calmly followed the shop boy and strode further into the shop. Soon, Xianxia met with the shopkeeper of Gathering Virtue Emporium in a reception room. He was a thin elderly man in the open heaven realm. Xianxia had a feeling that the elderly man was as powerful as Duan Hai from Seven Wonders Land, who was a 4th-order open heaven cultivator, which matched the information in the jade slip. Xianxia was stunned by how extravagant a first-class great force truly was. Even a mere shopkeeper in this star city was a mid-rank cultivator. Given his cultivation, this elderly man could have become a protector venerable in Seven Wonders Land. However, it was even more outrageous in First Inn, as the proprietress was a 6th-order open heaven realm master. At the thought of this, Xianxia relaxed. When Xianxia stepped into the room, the elderly man didn't rise from the chair. After all, there was a huge gap between their strength. If he stood up to greet this young man, it would weaken his authority. Then, the shop boy left and closed the door, leaving the two inside the room. Xianxia cupped his fists and said, "Junior Xianxia greets shopkeeper Gong Sunday." The shopkeeper of Gathering Virtue Emporium was named Gong Sun Hong, information which was included in the jade slip given to him by the proprietress. His face and cultivation matched the information recorded in the jade slip, so Xianxia wouldn't be mistaken. A smiling Gong Sun Hong said, You don't have to be overly polite with me. Have a seat. Yang Kai thanked him and calmly took a seat. Although there was a huge gap between their powers, he was currently a representative of First In. Therefore, he couldn't appear weak. Seeing that Yang Kai remained calm and collected in his presence, Gong Sun Hong secretly approved of the young man's temperament. After taking a few sips of the tea, Gong Sun Hong said, "Little friend, this old master has read your notice of debt and understands the purpose of your visit. You've said that you're from First In, but do you have a faith token with you to prove your identity?" Of course, with a smile, Yang Kai fished out the jade token given to him by the proprietress and passed it to him. After taking it, Gong Sun Hong infused his power into the token, and the next instant, the token shone brightly for a short moment. His expression changed slightly as he stared at Yang Kai. His face was visibly twitching as he asked, "Your shopkeeper is Madame Lan?" "Indeed." Yang Kai had no idea whether anything profound had been hidden in the jade token, which allowed the elderly man to immediately recognize who his backer was. However, judging from the elderly man's expression, it seemed that he was wary of the proprietress. That was good news for Yang Kai as he secretly became elated. As long as the elderly man was wary of the proprietress, he could easily collect the 10 million pill debt. "Has Madame Lan arrived in this city?" Gong Sun Hong asked. "Yes." "When did that happen? Why haven't I got wind of it?" "A few days ago," Yang Kai replied with a smile. "The proprietress prefers to act low-key, and we've only hung up a signboard for the reopening today." Gong Sun Hong's expression turned awkward as he coughed. Madame Lan is indeed a low-key person. As though he had recalled something, his brow started twitching harder. After a pause, he went on to say, "The reopening of First In is an important event that this old master should have gone over to congratulate Madame Lan about. However, since she doesn't want to make it widely known, she must have her own reasons for doing so." Yang Kai chuckled. "This junior is simply a subordinate, so I cannot speculate about proprietress intentions." Gong Sun Hong nodded gently and tapped on the table as though he was pondering on something. A moment later, he said, "Little friend, this old master is not aware of the incident mentioned in the notice of debt. Can you tell me why that person from 9 Stars Paradise made a move in First In and even destroyed it?" Yang Kai shook his head. "I can't reveal the details of the incident to shopkeeper Gong Sun. If you're interested to find out, you should ask proprietress directly." With a forced smile, Gong Sun Hong raised his hand. "Let's drink?" Yang Kai took a sip of the tea and stared at him. "Shopkeeper Gong Sun, this junior is here to demand payment from you. Our proprietress has said that 9 Stars Paradise is a famous great force, and gathering Virtue Emporium is a profitable business, so the amount of payment would be insignificant to you. I also have to collect debts from a number of other great forces, so I am tight on time and burdened with work. Would you please make the payment now?" A surprised Gong Sun Hong asked, "You're going to other places?" Yang Kai replied, "That's right." He then went on to name a few shops. Gong Sun Hong was astonished. Did so many of them make a move in First In? Those shops were all backed by great forces as well. There were indeed quite a number of them. Yang Kai nodded. "To be honest with you, the reason the proprietress has come all the way to the Star City is to collect these debts. She said that all of you have to pay what you owe. Proprietress said it would be best if she can receive the payments without incident. But if she can't, she doesn't mind going to the headquarters of those great forces to reason with them. She has also mentioned that the cave heavens and the paradises are supposed to be on the same side. So it isn't necessary to make things unpleasant for everyone over such a trivial matter." Gong Sun Hong could be seen frowning, but it wasn't certain what was on his mind. Yang Kai looked around and went on to say, "Gathering Virtue Emporium is such a big industry, so this junior is certain you earn lots of money every year. Although 10 million is indeed a large sum, it shouldn't be a burden to shopkeeper Gong Sun. If it's all right for you, will you please help this junior carry out his mission so he can go back and report to the proprietress promptly?" Gong Sun Hong nodded. "Since you're from First In and you have Madame Lan's faith token with you, this old master is sure the incident you've just mentioned is true and that this payment is duly warranted." But his tone changed. "This is only your version of the story after all. As for what really happened, I'll have to send a message to headquarters to ask for further details. If the incident is just like what you've described, 9 Stars Paradise will naturally not default on its debts." Yang Kai knew that he couldn't achieve his goal so easily. If he could collect 10 million by just demanding the payment, it would make it look like 9 Stars Paradise was afraid of First In. Therefore, he wasn't disappointed as this scenario was within his expectations. After a nod, he agreed that is a reasonable position. How long does shopkeeper Gong Sun believe it will take for you to send a message to your headquarters to inquire about the situation? 1 month, Gong Sun Hong replied, I'll give you an answer in 1 month. Hearing that, Yang Kai rose from the chair and cupped his fists. Then I shall have to trouble you, shopkeeper Gong Sunday. Please. Gong Sun Hong extended his hand. Upon leaving Gathering Virtue Emporium, Yang Kai immediately saw Luo Hai standing across the street. Then, he beckoned to her. Whereupon she approached him and asked in a hushed voice, Sir, have you completed your task? It went smoothly. Yang Kai nodded as he had somewhat achieved his goal. Let's go to the next shop. It took them the entire afternoon to visit 3 shops. Besides Gathering Virtue Emporium, there was one more shop that was backed by a paradise. Similar to Gong Sun Hong's reply, they requested time to send a message to their headquarters to ask about the situation. The last shop was only backed by a second-class force, so they were not as haughty as the others with first-class backing. Upon learning that someone from First In had arrived to demand payment, they appeared afraid and treated Yang Kai politely. However, they still couldn't make the payment immediately. Even as night descended, the Star City remained a lively place. After running around for the entire afternoon and dealing with so many people who were far stronger than himself, Yang Kai felt exhausted. Therefore, he told Luo Hai to go home and he'd look for her the next day. Before they parted ways, they traded means to contact one another, and Yang Kai told her that they would continue moving around the next day. Naturally, Luo Hai agreed to it. Upon returning to First In, Yang Kai realized that the place was bustling with noise as the lobby was crammed with people. He was dumbfounded at the sight of so many drinking and chatting with one another. On the other hand, the proprietress could be seen walking around the hall and talking to each of the customers. Yang Kai fell into a dazed state as though he was still inside the First Inn in the void. It had only been 1 day since the reopening, but the inn was already filled with patrons, which went to show that the inn was truly famous. Seeing Yang Kai, the proprietress beckoned to him, upon which he hurriedly walked up to her. After they entered the inner part of the inn, the proprietress turned around and took a seat as she gazed at Yang Kai to ask, How was it? Not bad. Yang Kai walked over and poured himself a cup with tea before taking a few sips. First Inn is extremely famous, so no one has dared to make things difficult for me. That's not what I wanted to know. The proprietress shot him a glare. Have you collected any money? Hearing that, Yang Kai put down the teacup and burst into laughter. It's not so easy. They each asked for time to contact their headquarters, seemingly wanting to validate the incident before deciding whether they'll repay us. How many shops have you visited? 3, and they all said the same thing. The proprietress nodded, that's expected. But make sure it's within an acceptable time limit. Don't worry. They've promised to give me a reply in 1 month's time, which should be acceptable. 1 month. And good. You can start working now. The proprietress waved her hand. What do you mean? Yang Kai stared at her in shock. The proprietress batted her eyes. You're a shop hand of this inn, so don't you have to serve the customers? There are many customers in the lobby now, and we're short on staff. Go help out? Yang Kai was lost for words. He had never served customers in an inn before. What are you hesitating for? Go now? Or do you want me to serve the customers myself? Yang Kai glared at her for a long time before he admitted defeat, as the proprietress was in a more important position than him. Then he said through clenched teeth, Fine. You win. After finishing his words, he turned around and stormed out of the room. Behind him, the proprietress crossed her legs with a faint smile on her face. Upon reaching the lobby, Yang Kai looked around and directly snatched a white towel from a shop boy before hanging it over his shoulder. Then he entered the kitchen to get some dishes. Everyone was a cultivator full of energy, so the inn was never closed. It wasn't until the next morning that Yang Kai had time to take a rest. What enraged him was that he hadn't seen Bai Chi since his return. Bai Chi must know that he'd have to continue working if he came back, which was why he decided to stay overnight somewhere else. Yang Kai secretly decided that he wouldn't come back the next day. After he was done with his break, He left the inn and sent a message to Luo Hai to inform her to wait for him in front of the previous tea house. When Yang Kai reached the tea house, she was already waiting for him. Seeing that Yang Kai appeared knackered, she went over and asked, "Sir, didn't you have a good night's sleep?" "Let's not talk about it," Yang Kai said with some frustration. It wasn't that he didn't have a good night's sleep, but that he didn't sleep at all. Although it didn't really matter to an Emperor Realm cultivator, Yang Kai still felt pretty tired. Since he wasn't willing to talk about it, Luo Hai wouldn't dare to keep asking. Then they set off for the day. Just like what had happened on the previous day, after visiting several shops, Yang Kai got similar replies. After giving it a thought, he realized that it wasn't so surprising. If he were faced with such an incident, he wouldn't believe only one side of the story, even though First Inn had an excellent reputation. He had entered every shop and had a chat with those shopkeepers. On this day, he managed to visit 7 shops. At this rate, it would take him 2 to 3 days before he could finish visiting them all, causing him to wonder about Bai Chi's progress. Thus, he sent a message to Bai Chi to ask him about it, but he didn't receive any reply, causing him to wonder what the latter was up to. That evening, Yang Kai brought Luo Hai to a restaurant and ordered some food and drinks for her as a gesture of gratitude. She had worked hard guiding him around all day and attending to his needs. Luo Hai didn't want him to waste any money on her, but upon his insistence, she had no choice but to let him be. During the meal, she still respectfully poured drinks for him, but Yang Kai wasn't quite comfortable with such formality because, just like himself, she was also an Emperor Realm Master, so there was practically no difference between them. He didn't think she should keep calling him sir, as he didn't deserve it. After they drank for a bit, Luo Hai's face had reddened and her vision had become blurred. It seemed that she was a light drinker. Yang Kai had always been curious about one thing, so he asked, "How do Emperor Realm cultivators in the outer universe advance their martial Dao?" He had condensed his own Dao seal in the profound Heavens Temple, an experience every great emperor in the star boundary had gone through. Apparently, the other great emperors in other universe worlds had had similar experiences. Nevertheless, the capacity of a universe world was limited, so only a small number of people could condense their Dao seals this way. How did people in the outer universe achieve this then? Since Luo Hai was a local, he decided to ask her about it. Luo Hai patted her burning face and said with a smile, "Those with an excellent aptitude can comprehend their own grand Dao to condense a Dao seal. However, those with a weaker aptitude like me can only rely on auxiliary aids." After drinking some wine, Luo Hai had become less restrained, so she no longer spoke as cautiously as before. "What do you mean?" Yang Kai arched his brow. "Some treasures as well as elixirs can help peak emperors condense their Dao seal, the most common example of which is the Grand Dao Pill. However, these things are all quite expensive and difficult to come by." In response, Yang Kai nodded. He had always wondered what those Emperor Realm Masters who hadn't condensed their Dao seals needed open heaven pills for. Although the pills were like a currency in the outer universe that could be used to buy various items, they were useless to Emperor Realm cultivators. It was unlike Open Heaven Realm Masters who could improve their order by consuming and refining such pills. Now, it seemed that Open Heaven pills were useful for everyone. Apparently, Luo Hai had been working hard in order to save up to buy some Grand Dao pills to condense her Dao seal, so that she could take a leap forward in her martial Dao. However, condensing a Dao seal was just the first step. After that, one still had to condense the power of Yin, Yang, and 5 elements before they could ascend to the Open Heaven realm. The martial Dao was long and winding, and one needed plenty of financial resources to traverse it. Not many people were as lucky as Yang Kai, who managed to condense the high-order materials for both his wood and fire element. Nevertheless, he wasn't even certain whether he could find the remaining elements necessary, and if even one of those materials failed to meet his requirements, he would fail to reach the Open Heaven realm in one leap. As they continued drinking and chatting, the atmosphere grew more harmonious. A long time later, Yang Kai said, "Let's call it a day. You can have a rest now. We'll meet again tomorrow in the usual spot." Hearing that, Luo Hai put down her chopsticks and rose from the chair. "This mistress will take her leave then." Yang Kai nodded and watched her leave. After the incident the previous day, Xianxia decided not to return to First Inn lest he be forced to serve customers again. Thus, he fished out a communications artifact and contacted Bai Qi, who, unexpectedly, replied promptly. After asking Bai Qi where he was, he immediately told Xianxia his location. Judging from the place's name though, Xianxia reckoned that it was one that offered certain amorous services. He dares to have fun at a brothel while I have to work? Bai Qi passionately invited Xianxia to enjoy the night with him, which Xianxia resolutely rejected. After drinking on his own for a bit, Xianxia paid the bill for the meal and left the restaurant, preparing to look for a different inn to take a rest. Although the inns in the Star City were not cheap, they wouldn't be more expensive than First Inn. In the past, he had to pay 1,000 open heaven pills every night to stay in First Inn. Later on, the fee was raised by the black-hearted proprietress to 10,000 a night. Right after he stepped out of the restaurant, though, Xianxia saw a figure standing across the street. Shocked, he went over and asked, "Why are you still here? Is everything all right?" He hadn't expected that Luo Hai would be waiting for him outside the building. Luo Hai shook her head. "I'm fine. I was just worried about you." Xianxia burst into laughter. "Those bottles of wine couldn't get me drunk. You should go home now." He thought that she was pretty considerate. "It's still early. If Sir wants, I can take you on a stroll around the city. You're always busy during the day, so you have no time to just explore." She paused for a moment. "Of course, for free," she added. After giving it a thought, Xianxia replied, "I'm fine with it, but will I be troubling you?" Luo Hai quickly waved her hands. "It's all right. There's no one else in my home, so I have nothing to do anyway." She halted for a moment. "Where do you want to go?" "There's a red light district in the Western District. Men love going there." As she spoke, she started blushing. Xianxia said, "Where's the Spring Breeze Fine Rain Pavilion?" Luo Hai lowered her head and blushed as she asked, "Does Sir know about that place?" Xianxia tutade, "I've heard of it, but I've never been there before." He had speculated that Bai Qi was having fun with women, and now it seemed that it was indeed the case. "Does Sir want to go there?" Luo Hai asked. Xianxia waved his hand. "There's no need for that. Let's just walk around." He suddenly thought of something. "By the way, I'd like to buy a map. Where can I get one?" Luo Hai asked, "Do you want to buy a universe chart? We have to go to 4C's workshop then. They have the latest and most comprehensive universe charts." "Let's go, then." Xianxia's interest was piqued as he had always wanted to buy a map of the outer universe. He remembered someone telling him that a universe chart included the maps of all the great territories that had been discovered in the outer universe. It could be said that the chart was one of the necessary items for a cultivator to roam around. Xianxia intended to use a universe chart to look for the star boundary. He was swallowed by a myriad facets insect and then unfathomably appeared near where Seven Wonders Land was located. Although he hadn't found the world tree, it would be wonderful if he could find a route home first. Luo Hai was very familiar with the city, so after passing through some streets, the pair arrived at a certain shop, which was 4C's workshop. Even though it was nighttime now, the Star City remained just as lively as during the day. After they entered the shop, a woman that looked like a maidservant approached and elegantly bowed to them before asking in a sweet voice, "Good evening, honored guests. What can I help you with?" Luo Hai promptly stepped forward and replied, "My companion would like to buy a universe chart." The maidservant replied with a smile, "Please come with me." At the same time, she motioned with her hand. Xianxia followed her to a row of shelves, but there didn't seem to be any maps in sight. Instead, the shelves were filled with boxes the length of chopsticks. The black boxes looked extremely odd. Although he was puzzled, he didn't ask any questions. Luo Hai then said, "Introduce them to us." Hearing that, the maidservant replying to the honored guest, "Our shop's universe charts are divided into 3 ranks. The lowest rank ones are of single great territories. They include the universe worlds that have been discovered as well as important spirit provinces of these territories. The middle rank is a map of the known universe, including all the great territories that have been discovered. It also includes all the information in the lowest rank maps as well as the locations of all universe temples and territory gates, making it fairly comprehensive and easy to understand." Xianxia arched his brow. What about the one above the middle rank? The maidservant replied with a smile. There's no difference between a high-rank map and a middle-rank map. An amazed Xianxia asked, why are they divided into different ranks when there's no difference? Well, there's indeed no difference between the two, but if you buy a high-rank map, we'll help you update the universe chart for free for life in the instance, for example, that a new great territory is discovered. We have many branches in different star cities across the 3,000 worlds. So honored guest doesn't have to worry, as you just have to take your universe chart to any of our branches. However, you don't get this benefit if you buy a mid-rank one, and will have to pay a fee if you want to update the chart. Upon hearing her explanation, Xianxia nodded. The maidservant went on to say, does honored guest want a map of a particular great territory? Or the compilation of all great territories? Xianxia replied, I want the compilation, of course. The maidservant said, in that case, I suggest that you buy a high-rank chart. Before she could finish her words, Luohai cut her off by saying, the middle-rank one is good enough. The maidservant shot her a glance, but she still kept a smile on her face. Good. It is honored guest's freedom to choose. Show us one, Luohai said. The maidservant nodded and turned around. Seizing the chance, Luohai spoke to Xianxia via divine sense. Sir, as far as I know, the high-rank map is twice as expensive as a middle-rank one. Moreover, no new great territories have been discovered in over 10,000 years, so it would be quite wasteful if you buy a high-rank one. Hearing that, Xianxia nodded gently. A moment later, the maidservant took out a long black box and passed it to Xianxia. You just have to infuse your divine sense into it. Upon hearing that, Xianxia was astounded. It was then he realized that these long boxes were the universe charts. Fortunately, he didn't ask any questions when he saw them. Otherwise, he would have embarrassed himself. Following her instruction, Xianxia infused his divine sense and immediately realized that the view around him had changed as though he had entered a new world. His vision kept zooming in on a particular spot and eventually stopped. After a glance, he realized that there was a red that kept flickering, and the words Star City were marked beside the red dot. It was then he came to the realization that the red dot represented his current location, and the Star City that was marked must be the one he was in. As a thought flashed across his mind, his vision started zooming out. Names began appearing around the Star City. They looked like the names of the surrounding universe worlds. Although it was his first time using a universe chart, Xianxia was able to quickly figure out how to operate it as it was quite user-friendly. At that instant, he thought that he should get one so that he could move around easily. After retracting his divine sense, he asked, how much? The maidservant replied with a smile, 500,000. Xianxia nodded his head as the price wasn't excessive given its quality and utility. However, did he even have 500,000 open heaven pills? Most of his current wealth was obtained from looting dead people from Seven Wonders Land. Then, in Wei Kei felt sorry for failing to bring Xianxia to Great Moon Province, so he passed him some pills before he left, approximately 200,000 of them. Great Moon Province was just a third-class force, and the pills were given to him by Wei Kei as personal compensation, so it was expected that there were not too many. Xianxia even reckoned that 200,000 pills had been quite a big loss for Wei Kei. Just when Xianxia was preparing to count how many pills he had with him to see if he could afford the price for the universe chart, he saw Luohai dragging the maidservant away and began discussing something with her via divine sense. After Xianxia finished counting, Luohai was also done with the discussion as she walked over and said, Sir, I've managed to secure a 10% discount for you. It's now 450,000. At that, Xianxia was speechless. It was then he realized that Luohai had pulled the maidservant away to bargain. It could be said to be a big discount to have 50,000 pills taken off the price tag. However, after counting just now, Xianxia realized that he still didn't have enough pills as he only had about 430,000 on him. Xianxia was now caught in an embarrassing situation as the price had been agreed upon, so all he could do was pay the bill, but how could he do that without enough money? As he was stuck in a dilemma, Luohai observed his expression and realized that he might be facing just such difficulties. So she spoke to him in via divine sense. Sir, have you not brought enough with you? Luohai asked Xianxia whether he hadn't brought enough money with him. Not whether he didn't have enough money, which was a very considerate question that had significantly lessened his embarrassment. In response, he nodded his head, but just as he was about to put down the universe chart as he had decided to buy it at a later time, he heard Luo Hai asking, "Sir, how much do you still lack?" "Not much. About 20,000. Yang Kai scratched his face. After giving it a thought, Luo Hai said, "Sir, if you don't mind, I can lend you the money first and you can repay me at a later time." Yang Kai turned to look at her in shock as he hadn't expected that she was such a bold person. It had only been 2 days since they met each other, and their relationship was nothing more than a client and his local guide. Furthermore, she wasn't from a rich family and must have worked for many years to accumulate 20,000 pills. One had to be truly bold to lend so much money to a stranger. After all, she wasn't even sure who Yang Kai was. If he ran away with her money, there was no way she could find him. Met with his gaze, Luo Hai said in a small voice, "I trust you, sir." Since she had said as much, Yang Kai figured it would be disrespectful to refuse her goodwill. Therefore, he nodded, "All right then. Just regard it as me borrowing money from you that I will repay in the near future." Luo Hai said, "I'll settle the bill." After that, Yang Kai passed a space ring to her and watched her and the maidservant walk towards the counter. In his heart, he thought that Luo Hai was indeed a thoughtful woman. By just helping him make the payment, she had allowed him to avoid a major loss of face. By having her pay, he didn't have to take the pills from her and let others find out he didn't have enough money to pay, as she could now just secretly transfer her pills to Yang Kai's ring. Just a moment later, she returned and said, "Sir, it's done." After a nod, Yang Kai stuffed the universe chart into his space ring and left the shop with her. "Sir, do you need anything else?" Luo Hai asked. Yang Kai burst into laughter. "I'm basically broke now. What else can I buy?" In an instant, Luo Hai became bashful as she realized that she had phrased her question the wrong thing. So she hurriedly changed the topic. "Are you going back to take a rest then?" Yang Kai shook his head. Recalling his experience the previous day, he decided not to go back to First Inn. He had intended to look for an inn to take a rest, but it wasn't possible now. After all, how was he going to get a room at an inn when he didn't have any money? Luo Hai must have realized this, so she suggested, "Sir, do you want to go to my place? Is that all right for you?" Yang Kai appeared hesitant. Luo Hai smiled lightly. "It's not a problem. There's no one else in my home as I'm the only." All of a sudden, she realized that what she had just said might make him misunderstand her. It was as though she was trying to seduce him, which was why her face reddened. Fortunately, Yang Kai didn't seem to mind it as he lifted his hand. "Let's go, then." It wasn't like he could roam around the city for the entire night, as it would be too boring. Moreover, he had just borrowed a significant amount of money from Luo Hai. If he was so eager to part ways with her now, it would make him look like he was trying to avoid repaying his debt. Therefore, he decided to take her offer at face value and go with her. "Then please follow me, sir." Luo Hai directly led the way for him. As they moved forward, they slowly left the lively downtown and entered an area that was slightly dilapidated. It seemed to be in the outskirts of the Star City, as they were pretty far from the central district now. Houses had been erected everywhere in a disorderly manner, and there wasn't even a single proper road. From time to time, people could be seen moving around, but their cultivations were all quite low. Most of them were in the Emperor realm like Luo Hai, but there were still a large number who were even inferior to that. Yang Kai came to the realization that this must be where those at the bottom of the social hierarchy lived. Fortunately, even though this place was somewhat dirty and disorganized, it was still within the jurisdiction of the Star City. Therefore, no one would dare to make a fuss here. Apparently, many of the locals knew Luo Hai, so as the pair walked along the streets, a number of people greeted her. When some women saw that Yang Kai was following her, a meaningful look appeared on their faces, which made Luo Hai feel bashful. Soon they arrived at a house. Luo Hai stepped forward and turned off the house's barrier. Then, she opened the door and stepped aside. "Sir, please come in." Upon entering the house, Yang Kai looked around and realized that even though the house was small, it was tidy and neatly arranged. There wasn't a yard, as there was only a hall and a bedroom in the house. A pleasant scent permeated the air which could make anyone feel at ease. Luo Hai invited Yang Kai to have a seat as she prepared a pot of tea and said with an apologetic look on her face, "This is a small place. Please don't mind it." Yang Kai chuckled, "I come from a small town as well, so I'm used to living in poverty." An amazed Luo Hai said, "Sir, doesn't look like you used to be poor. What I look like then?" After giving it a thought, Luo Hai replied, "Sir, looks like you've been in a position of authority for a long time, wielding great power and wealth." In response, Yang Kai guffawed. Luo Hai shook her head, "Sir, please do not think that I'm just flattering you. I've been making a living in this city for over 1,000 years, so I'm quite confident in my ability to read people. Why do you think I had the courage to lend you all my savings? That's because I believe you're a trustworthy person. You might become destitute for a short period of time, but you'll eventually rise to great heights." Hearing that, Yang Kai stopped smiling and carefully examined her. He hadn't expected that this woman, who had been so cautious when they first met, had such an acute understanding of the world. Luo Hai covered her red lips with her mouth and said apprehensively, "I've said too much. Sir, please forgive me." Yang Kai waved his hand. "Let's talk about you instead of me. Although your cultivation is not powerful, it's not weak either. Have you never thought of joining a great force?" With a bitter smile, Luo Hai replied, "Even if there aren't 10,000 people in Star City just like me, there are at least 8,000, all of us with no backgrounds and connections, so no great force will accept us. What can they do by taking us in? It's not like they'll gain anything from nurturing us." She paused for a moment. "In the past, there was a great force that had come to the city to recruit disciples, but they wanted children who were moldable. I didn't have such luck." Hearing that, Yang Kai nodded his head. He was also a sect master, which was why he understood this kind of mentality. A sect would rather spend the time and resources to nurture a disciple from a young age than take in a stranger who had already advanced far on their martial Tao. This had a bit to do with establishing a proper foundation, but the main purpose was to foster a sense of loyalty to the sect. "My only wish is to earn enough money to buy a few grand Tao pills to see whether I can condense my Tao seal. If I can one day reach the open heaven realm, my life will be worth it." Are grand Tao pills that expensive? Each pill is worth at least 10,000 pills. Moreover, it seems that it's difficult to make these pills, so the output is limited. Whenever these pills go on sale, they are snatched up in an instant. Yang Kai nodded, as this was indeed a thorny issue in the outer universe. There were probably many people at the peak Emperor realm who were unable to condense their Tao seals, which was why grand Tao pills were so sought after. It wasn't hard to imagine that besides people at the bottom of the social hierarchy like Luo Hai, all great forces needed to stock such pills. Therefore, the chance for people like her to get even a single such pill was slim. "How many grand Tao pill do you think you'll need?" 3 pills at the very least. Luo Hai smiled meekly. "My aptitude is somewhat weak, so without 3 grand Tao pills, I'm not confident in condensing my Tao seal." Yang Kai nodded as he wondered what grand Tao pills were made from. If he had enough ingredients and the pill recipe, he should be able to refine them as well. After they chatted for a while more, Yang Kai said, "Take a rest. You've worked hard for the entire day." Luo Hai replied, "I'll do that then. If there's anything you need, just call out." She didn't reject him as, despite her boldness, she still thought it would be inappropriate to let a man rest in her bedroom. While she was shuffling towards her room, she suddenly stopped in her tracks and turned around. Then she hung her head low and asked in a small voice, "Sir, do you need someone to keep you company at night? I can summon one of those people around here." Yang Kai shot her a stiff glance before shaking his head. "There's no need for that. Luo Hai visibly heaved a sigh of relief. Then she entered the room and closed the door. Yang Kai was left alone in the living room with a helpless expression on his face. He had never expected that he would have to stay overnight in the house of a woman he had just met one day. He decided that he had to get some money the next day to pay Luo Hai back. If there was no other way, he could just sell one of his son's true fires. A 4th-order son's true fire should be worth 150,000 open heaven pills, which would be more than enough to repay Luo Hai and still have plenty left over for him to use. He had 6 4th-order son's true fires and 3 5th-order ones, which were all obtained from the Golden Crow Divine Palace. A fifth-order material was worth on average 1.5 million open heaven pills, and if it weren't for him not being able to pay off his entire debt at once, he would have sold them all so that he would break free from the proprietress grip. When Xianxia thought about it like that, he realized once more just how much of a massive hemorrhaging the 200,000 pills Wei Kei had given him must have been for him. That amount of pills was enough to purchase a fourth-order material, while Great Moon Province was just a third-class force without even a single fourth-order open heaven realm master. After swimming in his thoughts for a bit, Xianxia fished out 7 faces and pasted it on his face to continue refining it. At the same time, he took out the universe chart and infused a bit of his divine sense into it. He was trying to look for the star boundary in the universe chart. It was only a moment later that Xianxia became astounded as he realized there were over 1,000 great territories that had been discovered in the outer universe, and these were just the ones that had been charted. There were still unknown great territories that had yet to be explored far beyond the borders of the 3,000 worlds. Each of the 1,000 great territories had a varying number of universe worlds as well as spirit provinces that were headquarters of different great forces. The location of every territory gate and where it led was also indicated in the universe chart. The chart was worth the 450,000 pills Xianxia had to pay for. It would take tens if not hundreds of years to compile all this information, considering the vastness of the outer universe, and the chart could still be updated. It was totally worth the price. On the other hand, anyone with enough money would be willing to buy a universe chart, so C's workshop clearly must earn a massive amount of money from this product. All the great territories had their own names, but Xianxia soon realized that these names had something to do with the strongest great forces in the respective territories. For example, the great territory where Seven Wonders Land was located was called Seven Wonders Territory. That was because Seven Wonders Land was the most powerful great force in that great territory. The great territories where the cave heavens and paradises were located were basically named after them. For example, the one Myriad Demons Heaven was in was called Myriad Demons Territory, while the one Great Battle Heaven was in was called Great Battle Territory. Xianxia also found Xianxia Paradise and Golden Antelope Paradise in the universe chart. He paid extra attention to Xianxia Paradise because Zhang Ruoxi's ancestor was born in that place. She had come to the outer universe together with him, but they had been separated by the Myriad Facets insect. If there were no more unexpected events, though, she should have headed to Xianxia Paradise. On the other hand, Golden Antelope Paradise was where the Golden Blade Yuan spirit existed. If he wanted to condense his metal element, that would be a good place to look. Then, Xianxia tried to calculate the distance between the two paradises and himself, whereupon he became speechless. That was because there were several dozen great territories between them. If he wanted to travel there without the help of the universe transference law, it would take him several years to do so. Upon that realization, he became slightly worried. Although Zhang Ruoxi was fairly powerful in the star boundary, she was still too weak in the outer universe. She was on her own, so it wasn't certain whether she could safely and smoothly reach Xianxia Paradise. Other than the great territories that had their own names, there were also many of them that only had generic names. For example, A1 territory, B3 territory, and so on. After going through them, Xianxia realized that there was a regular pattern in naming them. Those great territories that only had generic names were those that didn't have a single second-class force occupying them. For example, the one that Great Moon Province was in was called D39 Territory instead of Great Moon Territory. In that case, only great territories where second-class and above great forces were headquartered could have their own names. Those with only third-class forces didn't have such a right. Some great territories didn't even have third-class great forces, as they only had a number of universe worlds. It was an immensely difficult task to locate the star boundary in such an expansive chart, and after going through many great territories, Xianxia felt his head ache slightly. A long time later, he suddenly heard someone opening the door. He immediately retracted his divine sense and lifted his head, only to see Luo Hai shuffling out of her bedroom. He fell into a dazed state for a moment before realizing that it must be the break of dawn. "Sir, didn't you take a rest?" Luo Hai gazed at him in surprise. Xianxia put away the universe chart and shook his head. "I forgot to take a rest because I was busy with something." "Is it daylight now?" She nodded her head. Yes. They had to start working in the morning, so they cleaned up for a bit before stepping out of the house. After 2 days of demanding repayment, Yang Kai was already familiar with the task. In any case, he didn't expect to collect any money immediately. The other parties would have to verify his claims before deciding whether they'd make any compensation. Yang Kai just had to leave a notice of debt and have a chat with the individual shopkeepers. Then he would explain what had happened and inform the other person of the time limit of 1 month. Everything went smoothly as they visited several shops on this day. On their way to their next destination, however, Luo Hai suddenly said, "Sir, you have to be careful when dealing with the shopkeeper from 100 Refinings Hall." "What's wrong?" Yang Kai looked doubtfully at her. What was different about 100 Refinings Hall? She had never warned him about any shop before. She explained, "I'm not sure whether it's true or not, but there's a rumor which says that the shopkeeper of 100 Refinings Hall is a thug who is completely unreasonable." Yang Kai took a look at his jade slip and realized that 100 Refinings Hall was backed by a paradise. So with a smile, he simply replied, "It's fine. I'll reason with him if he's a reasonable person. If not, someone else would deal with him." With the proprietress, who was a 6th-order open heaven realm master, behind him, Yang Kai didn't have to be afraid of anyone as long as the other party wasn't a high-rank cultivator. Furthermore, judging from how the other shopkeepers treated him over the days, he reckoned that Furston was also backed by one of the 36 cave heavens. Although both cave heavens and paradises were first-class great forces, there had to be a reason that cave heavens were regarded as higher in status than the latter. Nevertheless, if there wasn't a real need, Yang Kai wouldn't want to ask for the proprietress' help. First of all, 5% of the money he collected would go towards his own repayment. Secondly, if he sought her help whenever he faced any difficulty, it'd make him look like a useless person. Seeing his attitude, Luo Hai held her words. After all, she had never met the shopkeeper of 100 Refinings Hall before and had only heard some rumors about him. It'd be embarrassing for her if she was mistaken. When they reached 100 Refinings Hall, she still waited outside while Yang Kai presented a notice of the debt. A moment later, a shop hand led him into the inner court. Upon stepping into this place, Yang Kai felt a series of violent energy fluctuations coming from up ahead. He was shocked as he wondered who had the guts to make trouble here. Judging from the intensity of the energy fluctuations, though, these people were not very powerful. At the very least, they hadn't ascended to the open heaven realm. Yang Kai reckoned that, just like himself, they had only condensed their Dao seals. A vigilant Yang Kai lifted his head and became astounded. In front of him, there was a large area that had been surrounded by an invisible barrier. Inside it, 2 figures continuously clashed with one another as they showcased their divine abilities and secret techniques. Could be said that they were in an intense battle. One of them was a young man in green clothes while the other was an elderly man. It wasn't certain what grudges they had against one another, but their moves were so ruthless that it was as though they were determined to kill one another. Both of them were similarly powerful with excellent methods that marked them both as elites. Yang Kai couldn't help staring fixedly at them for a time before the shopboy turned around and called out, "Please follow me." It was only then that Yang Kai retracted his gaze and followed after the shopboy. Soon, they reached a platform, on which a burly man with a ruddy face was staring fixedly at the battle in front of him with his hands on his hips. It seemed this man was born with ominous facial features, so he gave off a threatening feeling even if he didn't circulate any of his strength. However, presently, the energy fluctuations around him were unstable, which caused the subordinates around him to shudder in fright, as though they were worried that he would blow his top. The shop boy hung his head low and stared at his own feet before saying in a shaking voice, "SS shopkeeper. He's here. Tell him to wait." The burly man waved his hand and continued staring attentively at the battle without sparing Yang Kai a glance. He seemed agitated, but it wasn't certain what the reason was. At that, Yang Kai was speechless. In the past, no matter which shop he visited, the shopkeeper would always treat him politely and wouldn't look down on him just because his cultivation was weak. It was the first time he had been outright ignored. It seemed that the rumors weren't unfounded. Luo Hai might be right to say that the shopkeeper of this place was a muscle-headed thug. Since the shopkeeper wanted him to wait, though, Yang Kai had no other choice but to comply. Fortunately, there was a battle going on, so he just regarded it as watching a show by shifting his attention to the 2 figures. The battle was fervent, however, due to both parties having similar prowess, it seemed a winner wouldn't emerge so soon. The shopkeeper of 100 Refinings Hall appeared impatient, so he bellowed, "Wastes! The both of you! How much time are you going to keep wasting? I'll give you 10 breaths to defeat the other party. Otherwise, both of you will be sent to the mines." With a stunned expression, Xianxia turned to look at this brute, thinking that all kinds of people existed in this world. The two who were fighting were clearly equally matched, but the shopkeeper was now forcing them to decide a winner within 10 breaths. It was no different from forcing them to use their trump cards and forbidden techniques. Noticing Xianxia's stare, the burly man looked down at him and grinned, revealing a ferocious grin. In response, Xianxia flashed a businesslike smile at him. Hearing the orders, though, the two people on the battlefield leapt backwards and wore solemn expressions. Following that, even more violent energy fluctuations swirled around them, and in the next instant, as though they had agreed upon it beforehand, they were both enveloped in dazzling bursts of light and clashed with one another again. A world-shaking bang spread from the battlefield and caused countless ripples to form on the light barrier surrounding the battle stage. When the lights faded, one could be seen lying on the ground while the other one remained standing tall. The person who had become paralyzed on the ground was the elderly man, and the one who was still standing proudly was the young man in green clothes. Despite the fact that he had won the battle, though, his face had turned ashen, and all his clothes were drenched in blood. Apparently, he was injured as well. Just then, the burly man lifted his hand. "Throw the one who is lost to the mines. Reward the one who won." The young man on the battle stage cupped his fists. "Many thanks, Sir Shopkeeper." With a grin, the burly man took a seat and gulped down a cup of tea before sweeping a glance over everyone around him. It was interesting this way. Don't you agree? Yes, yes, yes. Everyone nodded as they wouldn't dare to say no. A speechless Xianxia wondered how 100 Refinings Hall was still operating. Just who allowed such a reckless and thuggish man to become a shopkeeper? Given this man's temperament, could the business be profitable? It'd be a miracle if they could break even. All of a sudden, the burly man turned to look at Xianxia and asked, "Brat, you don't seem impressed. What do you think?" Hurriedly, Xianxia stepped forward and cupped his fists. First in Xianxia greets shopkeeper Pei. According to the information in the jade slip given to him by the proprietress, the shopkeeper of 100 Refinings Hall was named Pei Buwan and had a fourth-order open heaven realm cultivation, which could be considered fairly powerful. First in, Pei Buwan stroked his chin. "Haha, that's a famous place for sure. Brat, why are you here?" Xianxia replied, "I've written my purpose of visit in the notice of debt. I'm here to collect repayment." Pei Buwan chuckled. "Debt? What do you mean?" Xianxia frowned, thinking that this Pei Buwan was asking something obvious, as everything had been written clearly in the notice of debt. It seemed that things wouldn't go smoothly today. Despite his thoughts, Xianxia continued calmly, "Shopkeeper Pei, some people from your great force made a move in First Inn and destroyed our inn, which is why proprietress wants me to collect a repayment from you." Pei Buwan tutade. "Some people from my great force made a move in First Inn? That's incredible. Who are you talking about?" Xianxia shook his head. "I have no idea, as I don't know the details." He had not the foggiest idea about who destroyed First Inn. The proprietress must be able to recognize them, but he was just a friendless and unlearned newcomer to the outer universe. Furthermore, at that time, he was hiding inside the 6 Fated Paths bag, so he wasn't even aware that First Inn had been demolished. Was this king one of them? Pei Buwan asked. Xianxia shook his head. No. Come closer and look carefully. Was this king one of those people who got into a fight in First Inn and destroyed it? As Pei Buwan spoke, he pushed out his face. No. Xianxia shook his head again. Are you sure? Pei Buwan narrowed his eyes. I'm sure. Since this king wasn't the one who destroyed First Inn, why are you asking for repayment from this king? Pei Buwan loudly pounded the table in front of him, shattering it into pieces. Then he stared at Xianxia with widened eyes. Brat, do you think this king is easy to bully? I wouldn't dare. Xianxia hung his head low and cupped his fists. I'm just here to carry out my orders. Pei Buwan snorted. Look for those who demolished First Inn then. What does it have to do with this king? Yang Kai replied, "Shopkeeper Pei is quite right. In that case, Junior will take his leave. However, there is one thing I should mention before I go." "Go on." Pei Bu-wan shot him a glance. "Before coming out to carry out my orders, my proprietress said that it would be best if I could collect all the debts owed and that if I couldn't, she would personally come over to discuss them with those shopkeepers who aren't willing to pay. If that still doesn't work, she would go to the headquarters of those great forces to seek repayment from them." Pei Bu-wan chuckled. "Do you think you can scare this king? Tell whoever she is to come here, then. Let's see if that woman can get even a single pill from this king. If she can, this king doesn't mind calling her great-aunt." Yang Kai shouted, "Junior will remember and pass on Shopkeeper Pei's sentiments to our proprietress word for word. Farewell." After cupping his fists, he turned around and left. All of a sudden, Pei Bu-wan frowned as though he seemed to recall something. "Wait." Hearing that, Yang Kai whirled around and stared at him. What else does Shopkeeper Pei wish to say? The aggressive light in Pei Bu-wan's eyes seemed to have weakened as he muttered, "You just mentioned your proprietress. As far as this king knows, most first inns are managed by men. There are only a small number of female shopkeepers. What's your proprietress' name?" Although there weren't many female shopkeepers at First Inn, none of them were easy to deal with. In particular, there were two of whom especially shouldn't be messed with. "My First Inn's proprietress is known as Madame Lan." With a respectful look on his face, Yang Kai cupped his fists in the direction First Inn was located. Pei Bu-wan's face twitched hard when he heard that and asked, "Madame Lan? Which Madame Lan?" Yang Kai replied, "I'm not sure if there is more than one Madame Lan who belongs to First Inn. It has only been a short time since I started working for her, so I'm not familiar with First Inn. However, I have a faith token from our proprietress. Do you want to have a look?" "Show me." Pei Bu-wan extended his large hand. Yang Kai presented the jade token to him with both hands. After taking it, Pei Bu-wan infused his energy into it. The next instant, he gulped hard before he let out a hollow laugh. "Oh, it's that Madame Lan. And this king is familiar with her. Several hundred years ago, I was a customer at First Inn, and she was quite hospitable." Haha. A few hundred years have passed just like that. Those days, he wasn't even sure how he should keep going, so he decided to change the topic. "Has she arrived in the Star City?" Yang Kai replied, "Yes. First Inn has just reopened a few streets away from here." "I see." Pei Bu-wan nodded. "Is there anything else, Shopkeeper Pei? If not, I'll take my leave now. The proprietress is waiting for me to report to her." "There's nothing else?" Pei Bu-wan waved his hand and extended the jade token, but he refused to let it go when Yang Kai clenched it. Staring at him, Yang Kai said, "What is the meaning of this, Shopkeeper Pei? A jade token is not valuable. If you want one, you can simply head to First Inn and get one from the proprietress. I'm sure she still has some to spare." An exasperated Pei Bu-wan refuted, "Why would I need a jade token?" Then he released the token. "There's no hurry for you to leave. Let this king think about this." Upon finishing his words, he rose from the chair and placed his hands behind his back before pacing around. He seemed to be deep in his thoughts as though he was pondering on an important issue. Seeing that, Yang Kai admired the proprietress even more. Even a thug like Pei Bu-wan became terrified at the mere mention of her name. Although Pei Bu-wan didn't let his emotions show on his face, Yang Kai would be a fool not to notice this abrupt change in attitude. Yang Kai began to wonder just what the proprietress had done to make herself famous across the 3,000 worlds. A moment later, Pei Bu-wan stopped in his tracks and stared fixedly at Yang Kai, as though he had just made a difficult decision. "Brat, you're here to collect a debt, right?" Yang Kai replied, "Yes, I am here to ask for compensation." "They mean the same thing. You're here to ask for money." Pei Bu-wan waved his hand and swept a glance over him. "I can see that your cultivation is not bad as you've condensed your Dao seal. What's your battle experience like?" Yang Kai frowned as this question was rather bizarre, but after giving it a thought, he simply replied, "I'm from an unknown, remote universe world." In other words, he had fought his way to the outer universe, so his combat experience was unquestionable. Upon hearing that, Pei Bu-wan's eyes became visibly brighter as he put on a broad smile. "Very good." Then he pointed at the battle stage. "Do you see that guy over there?" Yang Kai turned his head and saw that the young man who won the battle earlier was seated on the ground with his legs crossed. Apparently, he was trying to adjust his breathing and heal his wounds. Shopkeeper Pei, what do you mean? Yang Kai asked. I want you to fight against him. I don't understand. Pei Bu Wan wrapped his arm around Yang Kai's shoulder and said in a hushed voice, if you can defeat him, I'll repay the debt. A shocked Yang Kai asked, are you serious? Of course I'm serious. How much will you repay? I'll repay the debt in full. What exactly goes through this guy's head? How bored must he be to have developed an interest in watching other people fight? I guess thugs like him really can't be judged with reason. There was no doubt that Yang Kai was tempted by the suggestion. The amount of repayment was 10 million and he'd get 5% of it, which was 500,000. It could be considered easy if he could get the money by simply fighting a battle. All the other shopkeepers had asked for a month to validate the incident, and it wasn't certain whether they would pay up after that point. Therefore, Yang Kai was quite interested in Pei Bu Wan's suggestion. More importantly, Yang Kai had just borrowed some open heaven pills from Luo Hai the previous day. If he could get 10 million pills today, he would be able to repay her and free himself from at least one debt. Yang Kai had watched the young man fight earlier, and although he admitted he was fairly powerful, his foundation wasn't solid. If they got into a one-on-one fight, Yang Kai was confident he would win. He reckoned that Pei Bu Wan must be wary of the proprietress. Earlier, the burly man had sworn that if the proprietress could get even one pill from him, he would call her great aunt. Now, he must be trying to find a way out of this embarrassing situation. Thinking so, Yang Kai nodded his head. Good. Great. Pei Bu Wan clapped his hands and guffawed. Just wait a bit. That guy has just gone through an intense battle and exhausted himself. Let him restore some energy first. Naturally, Yang Kai didn't mind this. Pei Bu Wan moved and appeared on the battlefield in an instant before speaking to the young man, who gazed at Yang Kai and nodded gently. Then, he passed the young man a jade bottle that should contain some healing pills. The young man directly fished out some pills and gulped them down before he continued meditating. Following that, Pei Bu Wan returned to the platform and chuckled. Let's wait for 1 hour. 1 hour wasn't a long time, but in order to not make Luo Hai worry, Yang Kai took out a communications artifact and informed her that his discussion here would take a little longer, so he'd leave the shop at a later time. On the other hand, Pei Bu Wan told his subordinates to get a new table and cups of tea before having a small talk with Yang Kai. 1 hour later, the young man got to his feet on the battlefield and beckoned to Yang Kai. Shopkeeper Pei, I'm going now. Please don't forget your promise. Don't worry, I won't. Pei Bu Wan chuckled. It was then Yang Kai leapt onto the battle stage, and upon reaching the center, he cupped his fists at the young man, who was still tens of meters away from him. Yang Kai! The young man also cupped his fists, but as soon as he lifted his hands, he suddenly dashed forward and threw his fist towards Yang Kai's face. A blast was heard as a violent force swirled around his fist. It was as though he had some deep grudges against Yang Kai. This was different from what Yang Kai had expected, so with a frown he pushed out a fist as well. Following a loud bang, 2 figures were seen stepping backwards. A tinge of surprise flashed across the young man's eyes as he hadn't expected Yang Kai to be so tough. Before he even came to his senses though, Yang Kai managed to stabilize himself and shoot forward. An image flashed across the young man's eyes as he realized that Yang Kai had already reached him as a fist expanded rapidly in his eyes. Flustered, the young man hurriedly raised his arms to parry the attack, but he immediately felt an unstoppable force coming from the other party's fist, which was even more forceful than the first clash. He was horrified, but it was too late for him to summon any artifacts. Following a loud crack, he felt excruciating pain as his forearm bones were broken. The next instant, countless fist shadows rained down on the young man, turning him ashen. On the platform, Pei Bu Wan appeared surprised at first, then his eyes brightened intensely as though he had just found a treasure. Hot breath was even seen puffing out of his nostrils. Loud bangs were continuously heard coming from the battlefield as the young man could only defend himself without the power to counterattack. He was completely overwhelmed. Yang Kai was used to fighting against opponents stronger than himself. He might not be able to defeat an open heaven realm master, who had split heaven and earth apart in his body, which allowed them to utilize world force, but as long as his opponent wasn't an open heaven realm master, Yang Kai didn't fear anyone. If the young man had been polite, Yang Kai wouldn't have oppressed him like this. The problem was that the young man directly made a move without saying a word. So Yang Kai replied in kind with a ruthless offensive. Although Yang Kai was a human, he had the brute strength of a 2,000-meter-long half-dragon. Therefore, the average Emperor Realm cultivator was no match for him when it came to raw power. If the other person had widened the gap and used artifacts or secret techniques, he might have lasted for a while longer. However, he decided to fight Yang Kai in close quarters, which was akin to courting death. After just 10 breaths of time, Yang Kai pushed out his fist for the last time. The young man became paralyzed on the ground with his clothes drenched in blood. Yang Kai didn't intend to kill him, but it would take the young man at least half a month to recuperate from such injuries. Then, Yang Kai moved and appeared beside Pei Bu Wan, not even short of breath, as though he was just warming up earlier. With his fists cupped, Yang Kai said, "Shopkeeper Pei, fortunately, I didn't disappoint you." The subordinates were amazed as they looked at him like he was a freak. Pei Bu Wan placed his hands behind his back and paced around again for a bit before striding over and grabbing Yang Kai's shoulders. His action made Yang Kai feel uncomfortable, and with a frown, he asked, "Shopkeeper Pei, I've won the battle. Just like what you've promised. Will you make the repayment now?" "Repayment? What do you mean?" Pei Bu Wan glared at him. Yang Kai's face fell. "Does Shopkeeper Pei want to go back on his word? You promised that as long as I could defeat him, you'd give me the repayment in full. Did this king ever say that?" A puzzled Pei Bu Wan looked around him. "No." The people around him all replied loudly. With his hands behind his back, Pei Bu Wan looked smilingly at Yang Kai. "You see," they said. "No. I'm sure I've never said that." Yang Kai's face twitched as he stared at him in disbelief. "Shopkeeper Pei, are you serious?" How could he play dumb at this point? Yang Kai had never seen a person like Pei Bu Wan before. He was a fourth-order open heaven realm master as well as a shopkeeper. Usually business people treasured their integrity. If someone like him could run a profitable business, Yang Kai would get his surname changed to match his. Luo Hai was right to say that he was a thug. Without replying to him, Pei Bu Wan chuckled. "Junior has been enlightened today." Yang Kai cupped his fists and turned around to leave. Although he was incensed from getting tricked, there was nothing he could do as he was in the other party's territory, and there was a huge gap between their powers. He swore that he would immediately tell the proprietress about it so that she would teach this thug a lesson. Stroking his stubble, Pei Bu Wan stared at Yang Kai from behind and said, "Brat, fight against someone one more time and I'll definitely give you the 10 million pills." Yang Kai didn't even slow his pace. Once trust was broken, it was hard to be repaired. He had been fooled once, so he wouldn't believe Pei Bu Wan again. "This king will personally give you an extra 500,000 open heaven pills." Yang Kai still ignored him. 1 million, Pei Bu Wan said through clenched teeth. Seeing that Yang Kai was about to step out of the inner court, Pei Bu Wan gritted his teeth and shouted, "I'll swear on my grand Tao." Yang Kai had one of his feet firmly pressed against the ground outside the inner court, but he became rooted to the spot upon hearing that, as though someone had used a binding technique on him. A moment later, he slowly turned around and ambled forward. Pei Bu Wan grinned, and upon seeing that Yang Kai had taken a seat, he did the same and extended his head. "Brat, after the fight, I'll immediately give you 11 million pills. Take an oath first." Without looking at him, Yang Kai held the teacup in his hand, no emotion on his face. Pei Bu Wan said, "It's not so hard to take an oath, but there's a condition. The prerequisite is that you have to win the battle. If you lose, not only will you not get the 11 million pills, but this king will also not let you off." Yang Kai shot him a glance and realized that there was a tinge of ferocity behind his gaze. It seemed that the situation was more serious than he first thought. With a frown, Yang Kai asked, "Are you going to make me fight against an open heaven realm master or something?" Pei Bu Wan replied, "Don't worry. Your opponent is not an open heaven cultivator. The person won't even be a half-step open heaven realm cultivator. You'll be equals." "All right, you can take an oath now," Yang Kai nodded. As long as his opponent wasn't an open heaven realm master, there was nothing Yang Kai had to worry about. Furthermore, the person whom he had never met wasn't even a half-step open heaven realm master. "Are you so confident?" Pei Bu Wan was astounded. He did all he could to make Yang Kai accept this fight. but he became apprehensive upon seeing his casual reaction. If you trust me, take an oath now. If you don't, I'll leave. After taking a sip of the tea, Xianxia put down the teacup and rose from the chair. With a scowl, Pei Bu-wan appeared hesitant, but just a moment later, he stood up straight and said solemnly, I, Pei Bu-wan, swear on my grand Tao that as long as... What's your name? He was asking Xianxia about his name as he probably didn't pay attention to him when he was introducing himself. Left with no choice, Xianxia told him his name again. Pei Bu-wan went on to say, as long as Xianxia can win this fight, this king will give him 11 million open heaven pills. If this king goes back on my word, may my grand Tao shatter and my future be cut off. A calm Xianxia said, what about my opponent's cultivation? Hearing that, Pei Bu-wan gritted his teeth and took an oath one more time to include Xianxia's demand. Then he looked down at him and said, that should be enough. Don't go too far, brat. It was only then that Xianxia nodded his head. That's enough. Since the thug had sworn on his grand Tao, he could be trusted as no one would dare to make such an oath on a whim. If Pei Bu-wan went back on his word now, a blemish would be left on his grand Tao which would surely hinder his future in the martial Tao. Xianxia was curious about why this thug wanted him to fight against someone so badly. Would he gain any benefits from it? If there were no benefits, why would he offer 11 million pills? Xianxia didn't think he could ever understand a thug like Pei Bu-wan though, so he stopped thinking about it and stood up. Where's my opponent? You can summon that person now. He wanted to go back quickly. Pei Bu-wan grinned, your opponent isn't here. Why don't you stay overnight here to take a rest? I'll bring you to a place tomorrow where you can make a scene. Hearing that, Xianxia furrowed his brows as he realized that he had thought about it too simplistically. Judging from what Pei Bu-wan had said, it seemed that they were going somewhere to make a fuss. Did I fall into a trap? Xianxia had a bad premonition all of a sudden. However, since everything had been agreed upon, and 11 million pills were deathly attractive to him, there was no way he could back down now. And so, Xianxia sent a message to Luo Hai and told her to go back first as they'd meet up again the next day. Then he followed a servant from 100 Refinings Hall to a room. The staff treated him very well, giving him a lot of medicinal food and pills for treating his injuries. The pills were obviously high quality and worth a lot of money. Xianxia had a feeling that the battle the next day was extremely important to Pei Bu-wan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given him such favorable treatment. It had been a peaceful night, and in the afternoon the next day, Pei Bu-wan pushed the door open and strode into the room. With his hands on his hips, he blocked the door like he was a tower and called out, Brat, are you ready? Xianxia stood up and said, let's go. There was nothing to prepare as he just had to fight against someone he didn't know. The calmer Xianxia appeared, the brighter Pei Bu-wan's eyes became. That was because it suggested that Xianxia was confident. With a grin, Pei Bu-wan beckoned to him, come with me. After leaving 100 Refinings Hall, Xianxia immediately saw Luo Hai standing in a nearby spot. He stopped in his tracks and beckoned to her. A timid Luo Hai took a glance at Pei Bu-wan, who gave off a ferocious air. She felt immensely pressured because of his presence. Normally, if she came across such a person, she'd stay as far away from him as possible. However, since Xianxia had summoned her, she had no choice but to go over and salute Pei Bu-wan. Greetings, shopkeeper Pei. Pei Bu-wan took a look at Luo Hai before shifting his attention to Xianxia. Is she your woman? Luo Hai started blushing and didn't know how to explain it to him. On the other hand, Xianxia ignored him and gazed at Luo Hai. Why are you here? Didn't I tell you to go back? To which she replied, I came here at daybreak as I thought there would be something Sir needed to do today. There's nothing for you to do today. Xianxia flashed a smile at her before giving it a thought and saying, if you're free today, you can accompany me. Then, he turned to look at Pei Bu-wan. Is it okay to bring someone with me? It's fine. She can tag along. Pei Bu-wan waved his hand as he had brought some people with him as well. These people were supposed to be the shop hands in the shop. In fact, 100 Refinings Hall was in the business of selling artifacts, but business had been terrible for them, leaving basically nothing for the shop hands to do. If this wasn't the case, Pei Bu-wan wouldn't have let them tag along. Xianxia slightly nodded at Luo Hai to motion for her to come with him. Two people led the way while the others followed them. Wherever they went, the people on the streets would give way as though scorpions and snakes had appeared. At that, Xianxia was speechless, knowing that Peibu Wan must be an infamous figure in the city. It was no wonder that they literally had no customers. If Xianxia was the owner of 100 Refinings Hall, he would have fired Peibu Wan long ago. Shopkeeper Pei, since the battle will begin soon, is there anything you need to tell me? Xianxia said. Peibu Wan nodded his head. I do need to tell you the rules. Listen up. During the battle, you're not allowed to use any artifacts or pills. You can only rely on your own strength to fight with your opponent. It's the most basic rule. We can't use artifacts or pills? Xianxia arched his brow. In that case, he'd have an advantage. You absolutely cannot use them. Peibu Wan appeared solemn. Don't get nervous and summon any artifacts. If that happens, it will be considered a forfeit even if you win the battle. Xianxia nodded. Don't worry. I won't use any artifacts. In fact, there were not many artifacts he could use now. The things he had brought from the star boundary were not useful here. Of the actually useful things, the mountains and rivers bell had been destroyed, so he was left with Azure Dragon Spear, 6 Fated Paths Bag, and Shadowless Veil. Peibu Wan went on to say, life or death doesn't matter in the battle. In other words, you can kill your opponent if you're capable of doing that. An amazed Xianxia asked, you can kill someone in this star city? He was stunned as he recalled that even fighting wasn't permitted in this city. Peibu Wan grinned wickedly as he answered, you're only allowed to kill other people in that place. However, if either party admits defeat, the battle will stop immediately and the winner cannot make a move again, otherwise he'll immediately lose the battle. He turned to look at Xianxia. Those are the only 2 rules. Got it? Got it. To the side, Luo Hai turned pale as she listened and asked, Shopkeeper Pei, are you talking about Azura Arena? Peibu Wan revealed his hideous fangs and grinned at her. That's right. We're talking about Azura Arena. Luo Hai immediately pulled Xianxia's sleeve and said in a hushed voice, Sir, Azura Arena is an extremely dangerous place where many people die each day. You'd better not go there. Hearing that, Peibu Wan guffawed. It's too late. He has already promised this king he will fight. In an instant, Luo Hai's eyes were filled with worry. With a smile, Xianxia replied, it's fine. Tell me what kind of place Azura Arena is. He reckoned that Peibu Wan wouldn't tell him the whole truth, and since Luo Hai seemed to know about this place, he could ask her about it. After giving it a thought, Luo Hai explained, among the 36 cave heavens, there is one called Azura Cave Heaven. Azura Cave Heaven is filled with ruthless and bloodthirsty people who love to fight and kill, so they're not easy to deal with. They established an Azura Arena in every single major star city to allow people to fight against one another inside the venue, and killing is not prohibited. Anyone who wins a battle in the arena will win a prize, and if he keeps winning, the rewards will also keep doubling until he or she obtains the top prize that is determined in advance. For example, if Sir wins the first match, you will receive 50 open heaven pills. For the second match you'll obtain 100, and for the third match you'll get 200. This continues until you reach the highest limit. However, if you lose any match, you'll have to start accumulating all over again. Xianxia nodded. An interesting idea. Although one would only get 50 pills for the first win, the reward would snowball if they could win 7 or 8 matches. One could even get more than tens of thousands of pills if they won 9 or 10 matches. There are 3 ranks in Azura Arena, which are Heaven, Earth, and Mortal. 3 Azura rankings have been set up accordingly. The Mortal ranking is for people below the half-step Open Heaven Realm, Earth ranking is for half-step Open Heaven Realm Masters, and Heaven ranking is for Open Heaven Realm Masters. Regardless of the rankings, none of the people who are listed on the Azura rankings are easy to deal with. The arrangements were pretty reasonable. After all, for cultivators, half-step Open Heaven Realm was a dividing line. Once a cultivator managed to condense 5 elements, his power would experience a great leap forward, while after one ascended to the Open Heaven Realm, his power would undergo a fundamental change. Therefore, the half-step Open Heaven Realm served as a dividing line for the 3 rankings. Since Peibu Wan had said that Xianxia's opponent wasn't a half-step Open Heaven Realm Master, the person he was going up against must be listed on the Mortal rankings. I've also heard that the reason Azura Arena was established is to train the disciples of Azura Cave Heaven. The training they primarily get is through battles. The more intense the battles are, the faster they grow. However, although they're one of the 36 cave heavens, it's impossible for them to have a chance to fight with someone else all the time. Hence, the Azura arena is made to meet their needs. Pei Buwan turned to grin at her. Woman, you know a lot. That's right. Azura arena exists for the disciples of Azura cave heaven to train themselves. Everyone who takes part in the battle is a stepping stone for their trials. Regardless, the rewards are truly attractive. Even those in the mortal rankings can get 50 open heaven pills for winning their first match, and those in the earth and heaven rankings can get even more. That's why there are many applicants despite the risks. Since time immemorial, benefits have been the motivation behind everything. As they spoke, they reached the entrance of a certain building that didn't look special from the outside. It was just that its door was wider than those of other shops. Before even entering, though, Yang Kai could feel an air of bloodlust coming at him. Lifting his head, he realized that a signboard had been hung above the door. The characters Azura Arena had been emblazoned on it. These characters looked so bright that it was as though they had been written in blood. At first glance, the characters didn't look unusual, but as time passed, traces of redness seemed to be streaming down the signboard and dripping from it. Yang Kai arched his brow and blinked, whereupon the signboard became normal again. The bloody image he saw had disappeared. Shopkeeper Pei. Welcome, the shop boy at the door passionately said. It was apparent that Pei Buwan was a regular here. With his hands behind his back, Pei Buwan calmly grunted and led his group of people into the building. Upon entering the arena, Yang Kai realized that the interior was extraordinary. The hall was so wide that many thousands of people could be crammed inside it. The people in the hall were either in groups or on their own. While in the middle of the hall, 3 thick columns had been erected with glistening words written on them. Pei Buwan turned around and said, "Wait for me here. This king will get someone to make the arrangements." Then he left the place with 2 of his shop hands. After he was gone, Luo Hai came over and said in a small voice, "Sir, are you sure you want to fight? This is a dangerous place. You'd better leave." Yang Kai replied with a smile, "I already made an agreement." Her expression dimmed as she warned, "Then you'll have to be careful. The battles in this arena are extreme. Your past experiences may not be of much use." "Got it." Yang Kai nodded and gazed at the 3 columns. "Are those the rankings of heaven, earth, and mortal?" The 3 columns immediately caught his attention when he entered the hall. It couldn't be helped, as the columns were too conspicuous, so it was impossible to ignore them. Moreover, the words heaven, earth, and mortal had been respectively engraved atop them, so one could easily understand what they were. Luo Hai nodded her head. "You're right. Those are the heaven, earth, and mortal rankings." Yang Kai examined them and realized that the names written on them were pretty interesting. Most of them didn't look like real names. Instead, they were more like aliases. For example, Black Fox, Thousand Blades, and so on. There were of course some normal-sounding names that were probably real names as well. On these 3 rankings, the names at the top and those at the bottom were written in different colors. The top 3 names were a dark gold color. It was gold for numbers 4 to 10, silver for 11 to 30, and below 30 they were white. On every ranking, there were exactly 100 names. Those names were not engraved on the columns though, and instead looked more like light projections that had been written using some kind of special technique. While Yang Kai was looking at them though, one of the names on Earth rankings dimmed, which caught his attention, so he asked in puzzlement, "Why has that name turned gray?" Luo Hai turned pale, he died. Upon hearing that, Yang Kai became astounded. The name was originally written in a silver color. The fact that it was the 15th ranked individual suggested that this person had been fairly strong, but he had died just like that, which went to show that the battles in Azura Arena were truly ruthless. Although the rewards were attractive, one had to fight for them with their life on the line. Most cultivators wouldn't have the courage to take part in such a thing. While he was in a dazed state, the gray name suddenly scattered and disappeared as it had been removed from the Earth rankings. Following that, all the names below it moved up, and a new name appeared at the bottom to make it 100 names in total. There was a passageway in the corner of the hall, and presently a person, who was carrying a blood-soaked corpse that had lost all vitality on his back, walked out from the passageway as the blood dripped onto the floor. Seeing that, the people in the hall felt traumatized as chills ran down their spines. Yang Kai reckoned that the dead person must be the one whose name had been removed from the Earth rankings. Judging from the state his corpse was in, he must have gone through a difficult battle. Hearing rapid footsteps from behind him, Yang Kai turned around and saw Pei Bu-wan striding towards him. Then Pei Bu-wan said, "Everything has been arranged. You'll get your premiere battle in 1 hour." He scratched his head, "But there's a slight problem." "What do you mean?" Yang Kai asked. "What name will you use?" As Pei Bu-wan spoke, he pointed at the 3 rankings. "You can either use an alias or your real name. It's up to you." A nonchalant Yang Kai replied, "I'll use my real name then." He was just here for a single fight, so there was nothing to hide, and there wasn't a need for him to pretend to be mysterious. Moreover, even if he used an alias, it would be pointless if he couldn't change his appearance. Pei Bu-wan nodded and fished out a communications artifact. It seemed that he was going to contact someone from Azura Arena. After he was done with that, Luo Hai asked, "Shopkeeper Pei, who was going to be his opponent?" With a grin, Pei Bu-wan took a glance at Yang Kai and pointed at the mortal rankings. The one ranked 4th. In an instant, Luo Hai turned ashen. "How is that possible? Sir Yang has never taken part in a battle in this arena before, so how could he have the right to fight against that person?" She soon realized there was something wrong with what she had said, so she hurriedly explained, "Sir, there are still rules in this arena. A person can only challenge an opponent who is within 10 rankings above him or herself. If they win, they will replace that person." Pei Bu-wan grinned. To the average person, rules are rules. But to this king, rules are to be broken. There was a smug smile on his face. Yang Kai turned his head and saw that the name of the person ranked 4th was painted in gold. Yu Luo Sha. The name and rank suggested that this person would be difficult to deal with. "Let's go. You only have 1 hour to prepare. Get yourself ready," Pei Bu-wan said and led all of them to one corner of the hall. Soon, they entered a room, upon which a maidservant came over to serve them. The room was spacious, and it was directly facing the gigantic arena. At this moment, 2 people could be seen battling intensely. However, one of them was apparently on the back foot, so it was just a matter of time before he was defeated. The arena was surrounded by spectators who were constantly yelling and cheering. With his hands behind his back, Pei Bu-wan stood by the window and looked down at the battle. The terrain of the arena can be changed freely. You can discuss with your opponent and decide on a particular battlefield beforehand. Can also be selected randomly. Is there any particular terrain you prefer? There are options like snowy world, scorching desert, swamp, and so on. You can choose whatever you like. Yang Kai arched his brow. "So, this arena is also a giant artifact." Pei Bu-wan nodded his head. "That's right. This arena is an artifact." Yang Kai replied, "A random terrain will do then." With a grin, Pei Bu-wan shot him a glance. "I love how confident you are. Rat, you'd better do your best and win the battle. If you lose, you'll die. To be honest with you, your opponent is a disciple from Azura Cave Heaven." Hearing that, Yang Kai said, "Yu Luo Sha is from Azura Cave Heaven? Are you afraid now?" Pei Bu-wan looked him in the eyes. Yang Kai shook his head. "Not really. I'm just worried that if I accidentally kill that person..." "Don't worry." Pei Bu-wan lifted his hand to cut him off, apparently understanding his worries. "Just kill if you can. There are many disciples from Azura Cave Heaven who lose their lives in the Azura arenas around the 3,000 worlds. They won't care about it or retaliate against you at a later date. If they did, no one would ever take part in any battle in this arena again." "Good. One can use any method within the rules in the arena, so you must not hold back," Pei Bu-wan warned him with a solemn expression. After a grunt, Yang Kai took a seat in the corner and began to meditate. His opponent was ranked 4th on the mortal rankings, and they were from Azura Cave Heaven, so it was apparent that they were not a pushover. Although Yang Kai was confident in himself, he planned to go all out as this was a life-or-death battle. As time passed, the people around the arena became increasingly rowdy. But Yang Kai remained unfazed as he remained as calm as still water. There came a moment when the noises outside the private room died down, as Pei Bu-wan was heard saying, "It's your turn." Yang Kai opened his eyes and slowly got to his feet. The door was pushed open from the outside. A man was standing at the door as he cupped his fists. "Shopkeeper Pei, I'm here to bring your challenger to the arena." Pei Bu-wan nodded and waved his hand. "Bring him with you." The man scanned the private room and stared fixedly at Yang Kai. Then, he stepped aside and extended his hand. "Please, Sir Yang, you must be careful," Luo Hai said from behind him. Without turning his head, Yang Kai waved his hand and followed the man out of the room. After he was gone, Pei Bu Wan hinted at a shop hand beside him with his gaze. The shop hand gulped and asked, "Sir Shopkeeper, how much would you like to bet?" "Everything," Pei Bu Wan said firmly. Upon hearing that, the shop hand turned pale in an instant. "Sir Shopkeeper, please don't act on a whim. You've tried very hard to borrow the money to balance the accounts already. If you lose, you won't be able to explain yourself to the headquarters. If you dare to keep spouting nonsense, I'll rip your mouth off." Pei Bu Wan bellowed. The shop hand immediately covered his mouth. "Cut the crap and make the bet now." The shop hand looked through the gap between his fingers and asked apprehensively, "Do you want to bet it all on that Yang Kai? Are you going to bet on you Luo Sha?" Then, an infuriated Pei Bu Wan directly kicked the shop hand out of the room and turned around to look at the arena. With a hideous expression, he suddenly grinned and turned to gaze at Luo Hai. "Whether this king makes a fortune or falls into the gutter depends on this brat now. He must win this." Although he was the shopkeeper of 100 Refinings Hall, he was inept at running a business. Furthermore, he was addicted to gambling. While he was in charge of the shop in this city, he lost a lot of money instead of making any profit. Soon, those from the headquarters would come over to check the accounts, so if he couldn't come up with a way to fill the discrepancy, he would be punished. Although he had borrowed money from everyone and even put up his own artifacts as collateral for some loans, there was still a huge discrepancy. With not much time left, he decided to attempt making a fortune in the Azura arena. Although the winner of a fight in the arena could get a reward, it was nothing compared to the bets outside of the arena. Otherwise, Pei Bu Wan wouldn't have looked for competent people to fight in the arena. Some time ago, he had found a suitable candidate, but that candidate was defeated by Yang Kai with ease, which made Pei Bu Wan realize there was a way he could make some quick money. As long as Yang Kai could win the battle, not only could Pei Bu Wan fill the discrepancy in the account books, but he could also clear his debts. He wouldn't become wealthy, but at the very least, he wouldn't be sleeping on pins and needles anymore. However, if Yang Kai lost, that would mean the end of the world for Pei Bu Wan. He had made a bet with his future and fate on the line. Earlier, he didn't tell Yang Kai about it because it wasn't necessary and he was worried that Yang Kai might feel pressured. Upon seeing his hideous smile, Luo Hai turned pale as she didn't know how to reply. On the other hand, Yang Kai followed the man to pass through a passageway and reach the end where there was a closed door that blocked his way. Yang Kai turned to look at the man who flashed a smile at him. "Just wait here." At the same time, he could hear thunderous cheering coming from the other side of the door. It was apparent that the spectators in the arena were fervent. The arena must be on the other end of the door. Presently, someone was introducing Yu Luo Sha in an enticing manner. Despite the noises, Yang Kai could still clearly hear the introduction. Yu Luo Sha had a record of 172 wins, 8 draws, and 1 loss. This kind of record could be said to be horrifying, and she could be considered a top cultivator in the same realm. Furthermore, 60% of Yu Luo Sha's opponents were killed in the arena and 30% of them became crippled, leaving just 10% of them alive and healthy. Following that announcer's enthusiastic introduction, the cheers in the arena became increasingly louder. The next instant, the announcer introduced the other participant in a loud voice. "The challenger today is a rookie, Yang Kai." Right after he finished speaking, the door in front of Yang Kai slowly lifted, which allowed the light to shine in. Following the thunderous cheering, the arena came into sight. The announcer went on to rile up the crowd. Is he fearless because he knows nothing? Or is he a powerful challenger? We shall see. Let's go. The man, who was standing beside Yang Kai, smiled. Many thanks. Yang Kai cupped his fists and shuffled forward. The man behind him said, "Kid, you can admit defeat if you can't win the battle. It won't be fun anymore if you lose your life." Upon entering the arena, Yang Kai realized that he was standing on a platform. 1,000 meters away there was another platform where another figure stood. Apparently this was Yang Kai's opponent, Yu Luo Sha. Yang Kai raised his head and realized that, just like what he had expected, his opponent was a woman. When he saw the name Yu Luo Sha earlier, he had a feeling that the person was a woman. After all, no man would use such a name. Now he was proven right. Yu Luosha was a tall woman with fair skin and a rich figure. Her clothes were simple as her tight-fitting outfit perfectly outlined her curves. Her arms, which were as fair as white jade, were exposed as they dazzled the beholder. Although she was just standing there in silence, Yang Kai could feel a murderous intent wafting from her. Apparently, this woman had killed many people. As their eyes met, Yang Kai nodded gently at her, while she sported a dispassionate expression. There didn't seem to be any emotion behind her alluring gaze. Just then, the view around them started changing. The stands around them disappeared as they were blocked by a barrier, and in the next instant, the terrain weltered as a scorching aura permeated the air. In just a short moment, the entire arena had turned into a desert. Yang Kai lifted his head and saw a bright sun hanging in the sky. The heat was so blistering that the air seemed to warp. At that instant, he was astonished. He had heard Peibu Wan mention that the terrain in the arena could be changed, but he hadn't expected that they could even make a sun appear. Apparently, the desert was the battlefield that had been selected randomly. Things were now easier for him as there was basically nothing in the desert, not even a place to hide. No one could use any dirty tricks in this kind of environment, making a head-on clash the only option. Next, Yang Kai caught a glimpse of a figure flashing across his eyes, and the next instant, a gale was swept towards him, causing him to burst into laughter and mutter, "Why do all of you love to launch attacks without even saying hello?" This was a repeat of what he had experienced in 100 Refinings Hall just yesterday. However, Yang Kai soon came to the realization that extreme methods were permitted in this arena, so Yu Luosha's actions couldn't be considered a sneak attack. On the contrary, it was his fault for reacting too slowly. Still, as Yang Kai said his first word, he immediately flew backwards, and when he was done saying the last word, he already pushed out a fist. Yu Luosha could be seen parrying the attack with a palm, but just before their two attacks came into contact, her arm started twisting like it was a boneless viper as it wrapped around Yang Kai's fist and struck for his chest. Although Yang Kai was surprised by the move, he wasn't really caught off guard by it. With a grin, he didn't even try to dodge her attack as the energy around his fist surged. The next moment, both of them were struck as they were sent flying backwards. Yang Kai grunted as he felt the vitality in his chest roiling. At the same time, a kind of malevolent chi penetrated his meridians and physique through the point of impact. With a frown, Yang Kai hurriedly circulated his strength to resolve this chi as he gritted his teeth. It might have looked like a draw just now, but he knew he was the one who suffered a loss in reality. The fist he landed on his opponent's shoulder didn't harm her one bit. As soon as his fist came into contact with her body, she subtly withdrew her shoulder and used a mysterious power that made him feel like he had punched a pile of cotton. Realizing that he had come across a tough opponent, Yang Kai finally became serious. His biggest advantages were his intrepid physique and immense strength. No cultivator in the same realm could be sturdier than he was. However, when faced with an opponent like Yu Luosha, it was difficult to make use of his advantages. On the other hand, Yu Luosha did a backflip in midair and lifted her hand, upon which a blood-colored bow appeared. Then, she drew her other hand backwards, whereupon a blood-colored arrow took shape. The next instant, the arrow left the bow and broke through the air. Both the bow and the arrow were not artifacts. Instead, they had been materialized from her own power, so she hadn't broken the rules of the arena. The sound of something cutting through the air was heard as her blood-colored arrows blocked all the ways Yang Kai could flee and closed in on him. Her arrows are quite quick. Yang Kai turned solemn as he flicked his fingers, whereupon his dark moon blades greeted her blood-colored arrows, collapsing them on impact. When the last arrow broke apart, Yu Luosha suddenly appeared in front of him as though she had ignored the barrier of space and used instantaneous movement. Her slender hand lightly reached for Yang Kai's eyes, like she was about to pick some flowers or peaches. Yang Kai was taken aback when he saw her trying to dig out his eyes, and instinctively, all his energy surged to protect himself while at the same time, he faced upwards. Her slender hand was slightly hindered, but she soon turned her claw into a blade and slashed at his neck. Although it was just a fair hand, it was just as sharp as any sword. Despite the fact that Yang Kai had a dragon physique, his head would be severed from his body if he was struck by this blade hand. With no other way to dodge the attack, Yang Kai clenched his teeth and quickly used Nihility, merging his figure with the void. Yu Luosha's hand penetrated his figure, but she realized that she hadn't struck a real body. A tinge of surprise flashed across her eyes, which were usually as calm as an ancient well. The next instant, she exerted more force with her hand and shattered the surrounding space. Yang Kai grunted again as his figure materialized. Following that, he stomped his feet on the ground to widen his gap with this aggressive woman. Instead of immediately launching another attack though, Yu Luosha just watched him in silence. When he managed to stabilize himself, she gently nodded and said, "Not bad." Her tone was calm and without a hint of mockery. She seemed to be sincerely complimenting him, but one could hardly tell whether that was true from her tone. Yang Kai looked away and spat out a mouthful of blood. Although he had used Nihility to dodge the attack at the critical moment, he was still harmed as he felt all his organs shift slightly. Then he said with a grin, "You're not bad either." The woman indeed had a lot of combat experience. She did live up to her status as a disciple from Azura Cave Heaven. He didn't even have the time to take a breather since the battle began, which had never happened in the past. The series of attacks from Yu Luosha were successive and clean-cut, which dazzled her opponent. It was no wonder that she could make a name for herself in the Azura arena and achieve such a high rank. Given the moves she had showcased, rarely anyone below the half-step open heaven realm could parry her attacks, and any slight negligence would cause her opponent to lose their life. Yang Kai felt his blood boiling suddenly. Since he arrived in the outer universe, he had not had a proper fight. The people he had come across were mostly far more powerful than he was, so there was no chance he could defeat any of them. The only opponent that was in the same realm as him was Fang Tai, but at that time Yang Kai was just tagging along with two open heaven realm masters, so there was no question about the outcome of that battle. It was the same case in 100 Refinings Hall on the previous day. For someone like Yang Kai who had grown his power through constant battles, he felt quite constricted after a long time of not fighting. Although he had suffered a setback in the first exchange, Yang Kai's gaze had brightened instead of dimming. It was as though his fighting spirit had been ignited. After brushing away the blood from his mouth, he lifted his hand and beckoned to Yu Luosha. With his chin up, he appeared quite haughty. Seeing that, Yu Luosha narrowed her eyes, and there was a faint smile on her usually emotionless face. No one had challenged her in such a brazen way before in the Azura arena, not even the three people ranked above her. Although she was fourth on the mortal rankings, she was just as strong as the three people above her. Any one of them would have to use their full strength when dealing with her. However, at this moment there was this rookie whose name wasn't even on the mortal rankings who dared to be so impudent in front of her. She stuck out her tongue and licked her lips as though she had come across a delicious dish which stimulated her appetite. The next instant, the sand erupted and a crater was left on the ground. Yu Luosha had charged forward like an arrow leaving a bow. Her afterimages flickered in the air as she appeared behind Yang Kai. With Emperor Qi swirling around her leg, she raised her leg and swept it at his head. The power of her kick was horrifying. Even a mountain would break apart if it was struck by her foot. As though a pair of eyes had grown on the back of his head though, Yang Kai raised his hand and grabbed her ankle, then he chuckled in a small voice, "Where do you think you're going?" Right after he finished speaking, his expression changed because the ankle in his hand became slippery and slid out of his grip. Following that, he felt a warm body crawling on his back. Although the body was soft, it gave off a terrifying feeling. It was as though a python had climbed onto his back instead of a woman. Her legs and arms contorted in an inconceivable way as she forced him into submission, making it impossible for him to use his power effectively. Then he felt a hot breath on his ear. Despite her soft voice, she sounded more like the Reaper of Death as she whispered, "How would you like to die?" Before Yang Kai could reply to her, she widened her mouth and attempted to bite his neck. It was the first time Yang Kai had come across such a move in this kind of life-or-death battle, filling his heart with awkwardness. However, that didn't stop him from raising his hand to grasp at her hair and forcefully pull on it. Yu Luosha grunted as she failed in her attempt to bite his neck, and then she became unable to lift her head again due to the pull. A cold glint flashed across her eyes as she infused her Emperor Qi into her hair and forcefully straightened it. After a gasp, Yang Kai quickly retracted his hand, but it was too late as countless cuts had formed on his palm. Nevertheless, it was thanks to this moment of breather that he managed to surge his qi. An immense power gushed out from him and pushed Yu Luosha away. However, she was relentless as she wrapped herself around him. Her slender hands turned into countless shadows and her hair flapped in the air as she launched an attack on him from all possible angles. Looking from afar, Xianxia seemed to remain in the same spot as a figure swirled around him from every angle. Loud bangs were continuously heard as his clothes were torn apart in an instant. Although he appeared to be at a disadvantage as he had suffered multiple setbacks since the beginning of the fight, he remained calm and collected, which went to show that his temperament was truly sturdy. Despite the fact that Yu Luosha could hurt him, her force was limited. Unless she could damage his vitals, she wouldn't be able to severely injure him. On the other hand, if he managed to land a fist or a kick on her body, she would fall into a miserable state. Inside the private room, Pei Bu once stood by the window with his hands behind his back as he watched attentively. The shop hands of 100 Refinings Hall beside him kept cheering as they seemed mesmerized by the match. "Shut up! Why do you keep making noise?" Pei Bu Wan suddenly bellowed. The shop hands shuddered and immediately covered their mouths. A worried Luo Hai asked, "Shopkeeper Pei, do you think Sir Yang can win?" Given her vision, she could only see that Xianxia was at a disadvantage, but she wasn't sure about what was really going on in the battlefield. Pei Bu Wan chuckled. No one can be certain about it before the end of the battle. He'd better win, however, if he cannot shake off Yu Luosha, it'll be difficult for him to defeat her. Right after he finished speaking, Pei Bu Wan suddenly arched his brow and grinned. He's really something. Following a loud boom in the arena, Yu Luosha was sent flying backwards as she sprayed out a mouthful of blood in midair before landing on the ground and staggering. They were finally separated. Xianxia appeared disheveled and battered, but Yu Luosha wasn't any better off. There were times when she was negligent as she wrapped herself around him, and after getting punched hard, she found her 5 viscera and 6 organs shifted. A draha! Xianxia shot her a glance before grinning wildly. "Well, it's my turn now." He didn't seem to make a move, but he suddenly appeared in front of her like he was a ghost as he extended one finger towards her. Xianxia's movement was so light that it was as though he hadn't exerted any force with his finger, but Yu Luosha's pupils contracted as she stomped her foot on the ground and flew backwards. A blood-colored flower appeared on the spot she was standing earlier. The flower looked so vividly red that it was as if it had been fertilized with fresh blood. At the same time, a malevolent aura wafted from it. For every step she took, a flower would appear on the ground. After 10 steps, all 10 flowers took shape on the golden desert. The flowers appeared so ferocious that it was as though they were ready to devour any prey they came across. Xianxia followed Yu Luosha closely, and when he moved past the flowers, all of them withered in an instant. The expression on her face finally changed as she performed a hand seal with one hand, causing the withered flowers to fall apart and the scattered petals to rain down on Xianxia. Every petal seemed able to cut through metal and jade. Xianxia stood his ground as space principles surged around him. He was surrounded by innumerable void cracks, but they were almost imperceptible to others. Before the flower petals could approach him, they were cut to pieces by the void cracks. Next, he extended a finger, whereupon a moon blade shot towards Yu Luosha. The distance between them was short, so it was impossible for her to dodge the attack. Thus, she bit her tongue and sprayed out a blood mist which immediately transformed into a blood-colored barrier that blocked the moon blade. Seizing the chance, she hurriedly stomped her foot on the ground to widen the gap between them. Earlier, it was Xianxia who had to be wary of her, but it was the other way around now. It could be said that the wheel of fortune had been reversed and the situation was now in Xianxia's favor. Presently, they were several dozen meters apart. As their eyes met, Xianxia looked smilingly at Yu Luosha while her expression was solemn. It wasn't until this moment she realized that her opponent was more complicated than she thought. He wasn't an arrogant pushover like what she had imagined. Since it was difficult to deal with him through close-quarters combat, she decided to use her secret techniques instead. After letting out a breath, she used a hand seal as blood chi surged around her figure. A blood-colored flower suddenly appeared beneath her feet. The flower looked similar to the ones she had condensed earlier, but it was much larger. She appeared as light as a feather while standing on it. Across from her, Xianxia quickly lifted his hand and sent out over 10 dark moon blades at her. Yu Luosha remained unfazed, and when the moon blades came near her, the flower beneath her feet suddenly brightened. Following that, a blood-colored light barrier shot up from the ground and surrounded her. Whooshing sounds were heard as the moon blades slashed at the light barrier and formed many ripples on it. But they were unable to break through. Upon seeing that, Xianxia was lost for words as he was fully aware of the power of his moon blades. He wondered what this blood-colored flower was, as it was able to fend off his moon blades. It seemed that that barrier was truly sturdy. Yu Luosha used a different hand seal next as she chanted under her breath. When she spread her arms, countless gigantic blood-colored flowers appeared and filled the entire arena. At that instant, Xianxia was engulfed in a sea of flowers. Other than a sky full of redness, there was nothing else he could see. Even Yu Luosha seemed to have disappeared. He immediately activated his divine sense to scan the surroundings, but he was unable to locate her. There came a moment when a strange noise was heard. As the flower petals swirled, a blood-colored spear broke through the air at the speed of lightning. The spear was made from flower petals, and although it gave off an enchanting fragrance, it was filled with murderous intent. Xianxia surged his strength to parry the attack with his palm, whereupon the spear collapsed. Before he could heave a sigh of relief, though, Yu Luosha abruptly appeared amidst the swirling storm of flower petals. There was only a distance of 1 meter between them. She pushed out a palm that seemed to contain a power that could destroy the heavens and shatter the earth. Xianxia was well prepared, however, so he wasn't surprised by her move. With a grin, he pushed out a fist and struck right at her figure. However, the next instant, he furrowed his brow because it felt like he hadn't hit a real body. Following that, he could see that she broke into countless flower petals. After that, he felt a gale coming from behind him. His pupils contracted as he manipulated space principles and disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared, he was already several dozen meters away. He looked at his previous spot and saw that Yu Luosha had appeared with a flower petal in her hand. Using the petal, she shattered her own afterimage. As their eyes met, they could see the fighting spirit and the desire to win behind each other's gazes. Nevertheless, just a moment later, she fell apart again and turned into an innumerable number of flower petals. That was also not her real body. The people in the stands around the arena were unable to see what was going on in the battlefield, as the entire arena had been engulfed in blood-colored flowers. They could only faintly see 2 figures flying around and hear some noises. Despite that, it didn't stop them from becoming even more fervent as they kept cheering. Many people were chanting Yu Luosha's name, so it was apparent that she was popular in this arena. She was a powerful woman with an alluring face and an hourglass figure, which was why she had many male supporters. Inside the private room, Peibu once stared fixedly at the battlefield with a grim expression. Given the fact that he was a Fourth-Order Open Heaven Realm Master, he could clearly see what was going on in the battlefield. Considering Xianxia's current cultivation, if he were in his shoes, he would have no other choice but to admit defeat. Presently, Xianxia couldn't even find out the whereabouts of Yu Luosha's real body. So how was he going to win the battle? He would only stand a chance to win the match by finding her. However, did he have such sharp vision? Meanwhile, in the arena, Xianxia found himself in a dilemma. Unless it was necessary, he didn't want to reveal his trump cards. After all, many people were watching the battle and some of his methods might invite trouble for him. However, Yu Luosha wouldn't even reveal her whereabouts now, which made him powerless to do anything. Thus, he lowered his head as the fringe of his hair cast a shadow on his forehead. Despite the fact that the flower petals were coiling around him and a murderous intent permeated the air, he remained unperturbed. A strange noise was heard again as the flower petals surged and formed into a killing array before striking at Xianxia. Behind the array, Yu Luosha's figure was faintly visible, her gaze void of any emotions. It wasn't until the sea of flowers came near him that Xianxia abruptly lifted his head and surged his chi. In an instant, void cracks swam around him like fish. The sea of flowers collapsed while the void cracks dispersed. Following that, Yu Luosha raised her hand and landed a palm on Xianxia's chest. Ignoring her attack, Xianxia suddenly turned his head to look in a particular direction. A golden glow radiating from his left eye as he grinned. "Is it so fun to keep hiding?" After he finished speaking, he charged in that direction as he raised his hands, rapidly forming a set of hand seals. At the same time, he muttered, "Time flows on infinitely, like a mighty stream, like an unending dream." Then he pushed out his palm. Presently, Yu Luosha was hiding among the sea of flowers. Her pupils contracted to the size of needles as though she had come across something horrifying. She couldn't understand how her opponent managed to find out her whereabouts. Lifting her head, she realized that his left pupil had become a golden slit. His pupil appeared so majestic that it was as though it could look deep into her soul and dig out all her secrets, which caused her to feel incredibly unnerved. It was then she realized that he must have cultivated a profound eye technique. It was no wonder he could achieve such a thing. She wanted to dodge the attack, but her mind suddenly turned blank for a moment. When she came to her senses, his palm was already right in front of her. Following a deafening howl, the sea of flowers seemed to have received an order as they spiraled around her to form a protective layer. When the time-fly's seal struck, the sea of flowers collapsed and revealed Yu Luosha's real figure. There was a tinge of fluster on her face. If it was the time-fly's seal he had initially cultivated, it might not be able to exhibit such a might. However, Xianxia had witnessed the battle between Flowing Time Great Emperor and Emotion countless times in the ancient battlefield, allowing him to observe and emulate many profundities and incorporate their essence and experience to form his own martial truth. Currently, Xianxia dared to say that he had mastered the Time-Fly's seal, making him a match for Flowing Time Great Emperor when using this particular secret technique. "You're dead," Xianxia grinned at her. Right after he spoke, a white lotus flashed across his demon eye of annihilation. Blossoming lotus. Yu Luosha fell into a dazed state as her knowledge sea defenses became as weak as a piece of paper. A gigantic lotus could be seen expanding in her vision while at the same time her spiritual energy was rapidly draining. Although Yu Luosha had also condensed her own Dao seal, she was still in the Emperor realm. Therefore, she was no match for Xianxia when it came to soul cultivation. With the nourishment from the soul-warning lotus over the years, Xianxia's soul was much stronger than that of the cultivators in the same realm. Also, after plucking Yu Rumeng's primordial yin in the past, his soul had been enriched, and his spiritual energy surged in both quantity and quality. Although the power of his soul might not be comparable to that of an open heaven realm master, it was definitely on par with that of a half-step open heaven realm master. Feeling an excruciating pain in her head, Yu Luosha roared and instinctively pushed her spiritual energy to resist. However, as she tried to exert her divine sense, the white lotus only expanded even more rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the lotus had fully bloomed, appearing as clean as a jade and otherworldly beautiful. There was more to come, however, as a golden glint flashed across Xianxia's demon eye of annihilation as he used a different secret technique. Sealed lotus. Blossoming lotus absorbed the opponent's spiritual energy like nutrients to allow itself to bloom. On the other hand, sealed lotus caused the white lotus to close and wrap up the opponent's soul, cutting off the connection between the enemy's soul and body. It could be said that once a person was struck with sealed lotus, they would become a living dead until they could resolve the secret technique. The white lotus rapidly folded and engulfed Yu Luosha's soul in it. If she was still at the peak of her strength, she might have been able to break free of this seal. However, she had been struck with blossoming lotus just now, which siphoned off a good portion of her spiritual energy. Therefore, she wasn't able to free herself. Yu Luosha's vision dimmed, as though she had plunged into an endless darkness. She kept falling like there was no end. The sea of flowers disintegrated, whereupon those around the arena could finally see what was going on. Presently, Xianxia and Yu Luosha were slightly apart from one another in the desert. Both of them remained unmoving, seeing that no one could tell who had won the battle. Certainly, Luohai was unable to make any judgment as well. Since the sea of flowers appeared, she had become unable to see anything. Unable to hold it in anymore, she asked, "Shopkeeper Pei, did Sir Yang win?" All of a sudden, Pei Bu Wan turned his head, which shocked Luo Hai. That was because, in just a short moment, his eyes had turned bloodshot. She couldn't help but take a few steps back and tense up. With a ferocious grin, Pei Bu Wan said he won. Then he guffawed, "Ha ha. He actually won." He excitedly raised his hands as though he was the one who had defeated the opponent. It couldn't be helped as he already had no money left. Although he had borrowed some money to balance the accounts, it was still not enough. Left with no choice, Pei Bu Wan resorted to gambling, but he hadn't expected that he'd really turn the situation around. Now, he wouldn't have to worry about those from the headquarters coming over to check the accounts anymore. While he was laughing ecstatically, Yang Kai, in the arena, raised his hand and gently tapped his finger on Yu Luosha's forehead, causing her to collapse to the ground. Her eyes were wide open, but her gaze had lost all light. Before she could resolve the sealed lotus, she couldn't reconnect her soul with her body and regain her senses. Seeing this, the spectators immediately realized what had happened as they broke into a commotion. Yu Luosha, the number 4 on the mortal rankings, had been defeated by an unknown brat. The problem was that they couldn't even see how she lost the match. Those who had bet a lot of money on Yu Luosha started cursing and claiming that those from Azura Arena had used some dirty tricks behind the scenes. Naturally, those from Azura Arena ignored them. Soon after, the announcer proclaimed Yang Kai the winner. The terrain in the arena changed as the desert disappeared, upon which 2 platforms on both ends reappeared. A woman dashed into the arena and shot Yang Kai a glare. After that, she carried Yu Luosha up and left hurriedly. It seemed that she was eager to treat her. A calm Yang Kai returned to the passageway he came out of earlier. Inside the passageway, the man who had led him to this place nodded slightly at him. Yang Kai saluted him back before re-entering Pei Bu Wan's private room. Senior Yang. Those shop hands from 100 Refinings Hall immediately approached him as they appeared passionate and even slightly obsequious. Yang Kai scanned his surroundings and frowned. "Where's your shopkeeper?" Presently, Pei Bu Wan was nowhere in sight in the private room. Could he have run away? That wasn't possible, though, as 100 Refinings Hall was still in the city, so there was nowhere else he could go. Moreover, he had sworn on his martial Dao, so he wouldn't go back on his word. Luo Hai hurriedly explained. Shopkeeper Pei left the room to collect his winnings. "What do you mean?" Yang Kai was shocked. Luo Hai took a look at those shop hands and explained. Shopkeeper Pei placed a bet on Sir Yang's victory. Since Sir Yang won the match, Shopkeeper Pei also made some money. Yang Kai burst into laughter. "Was he so confident in me? How much did he bet?" Luo Hai shook her head as she had no idea. Seeing that, Yang Kai gazed at those shop hands. One of them said with a fawning smile, "It was quite a bit." A relentless Yang Kai questioned, "How much?" In response, the shop hand stuck up one finger. Yang Kai arched his brow. 1 million. The shop hand shook his head. 10 million. Yang Kai was astounded. It was then that the shop hand nodded. Yang Kai tooted as he couldn't help but admire Pei Bu Wan's boldness. He wasn't familiar with Yang Kai, but he had the guts to bet 10 million open heaven pills on him winning this match. Following that, Yang Kai narrowed his eyes and asked with a frown, "What were the odds?" In an instant, the shop hand became embarrassed and scratched his face. He wasn't willing to talk about it, but it was impossible to hide this as Yang Kai could find out about it after leaving the room. So, in a small voice, he muttered, 4-1. Hearing that, Yang Kai gasped and clenched his teeth. Seems he made a great fortune. With the odds 4-1 against Yang Kai winning, Pei Bu Wan made 40 million from his 10 million bet. It was no wonder that Pei Bu Wan was so generous when he promised 1 million pills to Yang Kai if he could win a match in the Azura Arena. After winning so much, Pei Bu Wan could not only easily afford the 10 million pill repayment, but even throw in an extra 1 million. 1 million was nothing compared to 40 million. It seemed that Pei Bu Wan had already done some calculations in advance. At that instant, Yang Kai felt frustrated as he was the one who risked his life to fight against his opponent in the arena while someone else gained most of the benefits. However, there was nothing he could do as everything had been agreed upon beforehand. He couldn't change a thing now. "Senior Yang, Sir Shopkeeper said that he wouldn't come back so soon, so he wants us to return to 100 Refinings Hall first. Don't worry. He'll definitely give you the 11 million. Yang Kai snorted. He wouldn't dare to go back on his word. After they waited in the main hall of 100 Refinings Hall for 1 hour, Pei Bu Wan was heard laughing riotously from outside. "Where's little brother Yang? Where is he?" Previously, he called Yang Kai brat, but after making a great fortune, he started calling him little brother. Before he even finished his words, he stepped into the hall and stared at Yang Kai with a pair of glowing eyes. Then, he walked up to him and heavily patted his shoulders. "Little brother, You're my lucky star. Yang Kai snorted. I think I'm more like your savior. He couldn't help admiring this thug's courage. How did Pei Bu-wan have the gall to bet 10 million on him? What if he lost the match? Same thing. Pei Bu-wan waved his hand and took a look at Yang Kai's teacup before frowning. Take this cup away and get him the best tea. Enough nonsense, just give me the money now. Yang Kai cut him off with no trace of politeness and extended his hand. Yang Kai didn't want to have anything to do with this thief again, so he was eager to take the money and leave quickly. Don't worry. You won't get one pill less. I've got the money. Then Pei Bu-wan took a seat and put down a space ring on the table before pushing it forward. After picking up the ring, Yang Kai scanned it with his divine sense and started counting. To the side, Pei Bu-wan looked smilingly at him. Little brother Yang, I never expected that you're so good at fighting. Even Yu Luo Sha was easily defeated by you. Are you interested in taking part in more matches? Yang Kai multitasked by counting the pills and shooting him a cool glance. Pei Bu-wan went on to say Yu Luo Sha was only ranked 4th on the mortal rankings. Although she's not bad, she's still no match for the 3 people above her. If you're interested, I'll make an arrangement for you to fight with those guys. If you can win those matches, you'll earn a lot of money. In response, Yang Kai waved the ring in his hand and declared, I have money now, so no thanks. Pei Bu-wan replied with a smile. Do you seriously think you have a lot of money? You have to hand in 10 million, so you're only left with 1 million. If you listen to me and win more matches, I'll give you 20% of the winnings. Ignoring his suggestion, Yang Kai rose from the chair and said, the issue has been settled, so I'll take my leave now. You don't have to see me off. Then he led Luo Hai to shuffle out of the hall. Wait a moment, there's room for negotiation. I can give you 30%. Pei Bu-wan hurriedly stood up and said. Seeing that Yang Kai didn't show any signs of stopping, he quickly offered a higher percentage, 40%. That's the maximum. I'll have to bear the risk of losing my capital, so you can't expect to get 50% of the money. That would be outrageous. Oblivious to him, Yang Kai disappeared from the place. This brat. Pei Bu-wan pressed his lips together. If Yang Kai were someone else, he would have forced him to stay as he was practically a money tree. If he could make good use of Yang Kai, he could easily gain lots of money from Azura Arena. However, Yang Kai was from first in, so he couldn't force the issue. Since Yang Kai wasn't willing to take part in more matches, there was nothing Pei Bu-wan could do. After Yang Kai was gone, he felt slightly dejected, but he soon became overjoyed because of the fact that he had won a massive amount of money today. Then, he took a seat and started counting his winnings. He had made a bet of 10 million, and he had won 40 million. After giving Yang Kai 11 million, he still had about 30 million left. Not only could he make up for the discrepancy in the shop's accounts, but he also had a lot left over to play with. The trouble that had been haunting him for days had finally vanished, so he was naturally joyful. Oh! After leaving 100 Refinings Hall, Yang Kai passed a space ring to Luo Hai. Seeing as she was staring puzzledly at him, he explained, I'm returning what I borrowed. It was then she took the ring, but upon scanning it, she exclaimed, It's too much, sir. When Yang Kai was buying a universe chart some time ago, she had lent him 20,000 pills, but after only 1 day, he gave her 30,000 in return, which was a lot of money for her. Yang Kai replied with a smile, Any excess is your compensation. That's still too much. She shook her head. I can't take it, sir. My service isn't worth so much money. Please take it back. Then she tried to return the ring to him. Yang Kai examined her, and upon realizing that she was serious, he burst into laughter before deciding to respect her wishes. Good. Deduct the money you've lent me and then return the remaining to me. Luo Hai nodded and started getting busy. A moment later, she returned the remaining pills to him. After taking it, Yang Kai realized that it was still early in the day, so he said, Why don't we visit more shops? And this mistress won't have anything to do if I go home. We can visit as many shops as Sir wants today. After he stepped into 100 Refinings Hall on the previous day, Yang Kai was made to fight against Yu Luo Sha in Azura Arena, so he hadn't managed to visit more shops. He reckoned that it would still take him 3 to 4 days to finish this errand. For the following shops, Yang Kai didn't come across any thugs like Pei Bu-wan again. After he presented a notice of debt, expressed his purpose of visit, and fished out the proprietress' faith token. Most shopkeepers treated him politely. As usual, they were given a time limit of 1 month, and in the blink of an eye, night had descended upon them again. The previous night, Xianxia had no money and didn't want to return to First Inn, which was why he stayed over at Luo Haiyi's residence. Now, he had earned 11 million pills, and he was eager to let the proprietress know about the good news. So he told Luo Haiyi to go home first. Soon, he reached First Inn and realized that the place was still crammed with customers. Several shop boys were moving around while the accountant was loudly fiddling with the abacus behind the front counter. Noticing that someone had entered the inn, the accountant said without raising his head, "We're fully booked now. Please go somewhere else." Xianxia tapped on the table, "Where's proprietress?" It was only then that the accountant lifted his head. "It's you. I thought it was a customer." He pointed at the rear court with his lips pouting. "She's in her room." Xianxia nodded. "All right, you can continue doing your things." Then he shuffled towards the backyard. The accountant watched him leave as he shivered slightly while muttering under his breath. Why did he even decide to come back at this point? It's like knocking on the gates of hell. What's wrong with him? Upon stepping into the rear court, he saw someone in the corner who repeatedly squatted and got up. There seemed to be something on his shoulders. An amazed Xianxia walked over and realized that the person was Bai Qi. As their eyes met, Bai Qi flashed a smile at him and panted, "You're back." And Xianxia nodded and looked curiously at him. "What are you doing here?" "And nothing." Bai Qi got up with difficulty as he almost didn't have the energy to finish his words. It was apparent that the thing on his shoulders was very heavy. "I'm cultivating." "Here." Xianxia became puzzled as he wondered whether Bai Qi had lost his mind. Even if he wanted to cultivate, he should look for a suitable place instead of doing it in the rear court where the proprietress lived. "Is Xianxia back?" The proprietress' voice was heard coming from a room where the candlelight flickered. "Yes, I've returned." Xianxia yelled and took a glance at Bai Qi. After shaking his head, he stopped paying attention to him and knocked on the door. "Come in." Xianxia pushed the door open, but before he could let the proprietress know about the good news, he saw a white shadow rapidly approaching him. Shocked, he tried to flee. However, the white shadow was unbelievably swift as it grabbed his collar and pulled him into the room. Following that, the door was slammed shut. An anxious Xianxia thought that someone had launched a sneak attack on him, but after a glance, he realized that it was the proprietress who was standing in front of him. It wasn't so surprising as this was her room, so who else could it be? At this moment, she was staring coldly at him with a pair of glacial eyes. Xianxia shot her a glare. "What's wrong?" He didn't think he had offended this crazy woman in any way, but she looked like she was about to skin him alive. "How do you still have the gall to ask?" After a sneer, the proprietress extended her hand into the void and fished out something that looked like a feather duster. Then she attempted to strike Xianxia with it. A shocked Xianxia hurriedly lifted his hand to fend it off. Nevertheless, there was a huge gap between their strength, so his attempt was futile and the feather duster directly hit his head. It hurt so much that his eyes turned bloodshot, and with his hands on his head, Xianxia bellowed, "What are you doing? Can't you see I'm hitting you?" Then, she directly pushed out the feather duster and poked right on his stomach. "That's not what I meant. I was asking why you're hitting me." Xianxia wanted to speak, but he was unable to do that as he felt his stomach churning as he bent his back. The proprietress landed another strike on his shoulder. A horrified Xianxia jumped up and leapt backwards in an attempt to dash out of the room. However, she just grabbed the air and directly pulled him back. The huge gap in their powers dictated that Xianxia was totally unable to resist. Presently, he felt humiliated and enraged. In all his life, he had never been hit by anyone in such an insulting way before. More importantly, he didn't even have the foggiest idea about why he was beaten. After getting struck several times again, he felt immensely incensed. Infuriated and emboldened, he barked, "Crazy woman, I dare you to lay your hand on me one more time." "Crazy woman?" The proprietress was so enraged that she started laughing. The next instant, her feather duster turned into countless shadows and engulfed him. At that moment, Xianxia kept jumping up as he was hit. Gritting his teeth, he reckoned that a man had to yield when it was necessary. Regardless, he had to find out the crux of the problem first, so he hurriedly yelled, "Stop hitting me!" Let's talk it out. I'm a crazy woman, so I'm unreasonable. I can do whatever I want. Then, she landed more whips on him. After getting refuted, Xianxia was unable to even get mad at her anymore. Thus, he squatted in one corner and covered his head with his hands. Seeing that, the proprietress finally stopped. Slowly raising his head, Xianxia looked through the gap between his fingers with a vigilant gaze. A condescending proprietress looked down at him with an indifferent expression. Spill it. Where were you last night? Why didn't you come back? An incensed Xianxia bellowed. Did you hit me just because of that? He slowly stood up. Seeing her smacking the feather duster into her palm, Xianxia shrunk back again and secretly swore that if when he ascended to the open heaven realm one day, he would retaliate and make her go through an ordeal that was 100 times more gut-wrenching than what he had suffered. Cut the crap and answer my question. Xianxia snorted. I was staying over at a friend's house. A friend. The proprietress sneered. It's only been a few days since we arrived in this star city. When did you make friends here? Was this friend a man or a woman? What does that have to do with you? Xianxia wanted to refute her, but he was worried that he would infuriate her again. So he replied, a woman. Right after he finished speaking, the proprietress struck him with the feather duster again. There was a resentful look on her face as she barked. You're so young, but you've already learned to hook up with random women. You've been here for only a few days, but you've already stayed over at a woman's house. I'm young. Xianxia was speechless at that comment, thinking that he was already about 200 years old, but he was still treated like he was a little kid. Nevertheless, he recalled that the proprietress had lived for many times longer, so had the right to act this way. However, even if she wanted to reprimand him, she shouldn't have made a move against him. An enraged Xianxia bellowed, stop hitting me. Otherwise, I'll resist. The proprietress stopped what she was doing and gazed nonchalantly at him. A faint smile on her face as she asked, how are you going to resist? Xianxia parted his lips, but he was unable to say anything because he couldn't defeat her. Otherwise, he would have counterattacked and made her beg for mercy long ago. I'll only give you one chance. If you dare to stay over at some random person's house again, I won't let you off. The proprietress snorted and kept the feather duster. Seeing that, Xianxia slowly got to his feet and moved his body a little. Still furious, he muttered, you're so ruthless. Her lashes just now were immensely painful. However, she had exquisite control over her strength, so she was able to make him suffer excruciating pain while leaving no marks on his body. If you do it one more time, I'll show you the true meaning of ruthless. The proprietress sneered, come with me. Xianxia wondered what she was up to. Although he was apprehensive, he had no choice but to follow her. Soon, they reached the yard and walked up to Bai Qi. With a fawning smile, Bai Qi called out, proprietress, shut up. The proprietress shot him a glare, whereupon he hurriedly kept his mouth shut. Then she shifted her attention to Xianxia and pointed at the spot beside Bai Qi. Stand right there. The corner of Xianxia's mouth twitched as he finally realized what the proprietress was trying to do and the reason Bai Qi was squatting in the yard in the middle of the night instead of sleeping. Proprietress, is this even necessary? Xianxia shot her a glance. She giggled and lifted her hand, at which point the feather duster appeared. After a gulp, Xianxia hurriedly nodded. Good. You'll regret this. Then he stood beside Bai Qi. Why do you always have so much nonsense to spew? The proprietress snorted and extended her hand into the void. After fishing out a wooden rod, she placed it on his shoulders. In an instant, Xianxia's figure shrank. The wooden rod looked ordinary and was only about a meter long, but it weighed at least 100,000 kilograms. It was no wonder that Bai Qi was panting while carrying it on his shoulders. Apparently, the wooden rod was a kind of rare material that could be used for artifact refining. If you dare to not come back again, you won't be standing here. I'll definitely throw you out on the streets. The proprietress snorted and swung her sleeve before shuffling into her room. A fawning Bai Qi said, have a good night's sleep. Ignoring him, the proprietress slammed the door shut. The breeze whisked through the yard as the brothers who were suffering together respectively carried a wooden rod on their backs and looked dazedly at one another. She's crossed the line, Bai Qi suddenly said. I just didn't come back for 2 nights. Why was she making a fuss over it? After shooting him a glance, Xianxia scoffed and closed his eyes to focus his mind. Although he was indeed in an embarrassing situation, no one else could see them at the very least, so he simply regarded it as a cultivation session. He had intended to inform the proprietress about the fact that he had collected a debt of 10 million already, but he wasn't in the mood to do that now. To the side, an infuriated Bai Qi kept muttering on and on. Eventually, an enraged proprietress struck the air and landed a slap on Bai Qi, which caused Bai Qi to collapse to the ground. He became quieter after the incident. In the latter half of the night, most of the customers were gone. The accountant, the chef, and the other shop boys had nothing else to do, so they came to the backyard and watched Xianxia and Bai Qi, which made them feel exasperated. At the break of dawn, Xianxia said, "Proprietress, we have to go out to demand repayments." "Scram!" she was heard bellowing from the room. After trading glances, Xianxia and Bai Qi hurriedly put the wooden rods down on the ground and dashed out of the inn. Since that horrible experience, the two of them became much better behaved. For the next few days, they would always return to First Inn in the evening to serve customers before going out to demand repayments in the morning. After a few days, they visited all the shops on their respective lists, and all that was left was to wait for the 1-month deadline to pass. Xianxia had fully paid Luo Haiyi's fees and treated her to a meal to thank her. In fact, he had the intention to help her join First Inn. Presently, business was booming in the inn, and the shop hands were swamped with work, so a new helper would ease their burden. If Luo Haiyi could enter First Inn, it would be good for her as well. Regardless of whether her salary would be better than what she would get as a local guide, she would have a shelter at the very least. After all, no ordinary people would dare to offend the shop hands from First Inn. However, he realized that he didn't have the right to make any decision in the inn. Moreover, the proprietress seemed to have something against him recently, so it would only produce the opposite of the desired result if he brought it up at this point. Xianxia reckoned that he should collect all the debts first before mentioning it to the proprietress. It would be wonderful if she would agree to it, but if not, he wouldn't suffer any losses. Also, he didn't inform Luo Haiyi about his intention, as it still wouldn't be too late to tell her about it after it was confirmed. Certainly, she wouldn't turn him down. The following days were peaceful. In the morning, Xianxia would serve the customers in the main hall. After the customers were gone at night, he would have some time to cultivate. During this period of time, Pei Buwan from 100 Refinings Hall visited the inn several times. After greeting the proprietress, he would directly look for Xianxia. Naturally, he wanted Xianxia to take part in more matches in Azure Arena to make more money. Xianxia wasn't interested, as although he had defeated Yu Luosha, he had also exposed his demon eye of annihilation at that time. If those from Myriad Demons Heaven found out about it, he wouldn't even know what the consequences would be. Moreover, he wasn't lacking money at the moment, as he hadn't even touched the 1 million pills he had earned from the last match. In any case, the things he wanted couldn't be bought with money. 7th order and above materials couldn't be gauged in monetary terms. Also, he wasn't in the rush to return the 16 million to the proprietress, so it wasn't necessary for him to go to the Azure Arena anymore. In the blink of an eye, 1 month had passed. Xianxia calmly stepped out of the inn and followed the path he had walked down 1 month ago to demand repayments from the various shops. His mission could be regarded as successful. Those from second-class forces couldn't afford to offend First Inn, so after they sent a message to their headquarters and confirmed that their top cultivators were indeed involved in First Inn's destruction, most of them generously paid the debt of 10 million. After 6 days, 13 out of 19 shops had repaid the debts. The remaining 6 shops were also willing to pay up, but 10 million was a lot of pills, so they needed more time to prepare them. Xianxia wasn't a ruthless man, so he agreed to their requests and extended the deadline. He would only visit them again when the time was due. A few days later, he stepped out of a shop after getting the repayment from them. While he was walking on a street, he heard someone calling out to him. Lifting his head, he saw Bai Qi beckoning to him from the 2nd floor of a restaurant. It was such a coincidence. This star city was apparently just a mid-sized city, but it was the first time he came across Bai Qi while collecting debts. Certainly, he was more than happy to grab a drink with him. Seeing that Bai Qi was drinking on his own by the window, Xianxia took a seat across from him and told the shop hand to get him a bowl and a pair of chopsticks. Then they had a small celebration together. After eating and drinking for a while, Bai Qi asked, "How are you doing with the debt collection?" While picking up some vegetables, Xianxia replied, "There are 2 shops left. We've agreed on a time to collect the debts." "What about you?" Bai Qi pressed his lips together. "Most of them are willing to pay up, but there's one shop that is particularly difficult to deal with." "Which one?" Xianxia was surprised. They would always leave a notice of debt before demanding repayment, but there were still some people who had no regard for first in, which was why he was curious. Bai Qi replied, "Wind and Cloud Auction House." Xianxia frowned. "Is that a business of wind and cloud paradise?" Although he wasn't aware of all the great forces in the outer universe, he was familiar with all 36 cave heavens and 72 paradises at the very least. Wind and Cloud Auction House was obviously an industry of wind and cloud paradise. Bai Qi nodded. "What did they say?" Xianxia asked. Bai Qi snorted. "They said that they have no money. If I want any repayment, I should get the proprietress to visit them." "Did they really say that?" Xianxia was shocked. He had visited the shops owned by several paradises before, and although the shopkeepers were not obsequious, they were still polite to him. What was wrong with those from Wind and Cloud Auction House? Why would they humiliate a shop hand from first in? Apparently, Bai Qi was frustrated over this issue. He couldn't tell others about it, but since he had come across Xianxia, he decided to vent his frustration to him. "What do you think I should do? It's not like I can really get the proprietress to go over. It will make me look useless. However, they are unwilling to give me the money, and I can't explain myself to the proprietress." "Have you explained what happened to them?" Xianxia stared at him. Bai Qi replied, "Of course I have. I even met their shopkeeper twice. But after that, they refused to let me in again." "They're pretty brazen of them," Xianxia sneered. Whatever the case, he was also part of First In now, which was why he shared Bai Qi's fury. Bai Qi took a look at him and darted his gaze around. Then, he said with a grin, "Xianxia, why don't you visit them on my behalf? They have never met you before, so they won't shut you out." With a frown, Xianxia replied, "It might not be useful even if I go." Just like Bai Qi, he was also a shop hand from First In. Since Bai Qi couldn't demand any repayment from them, it was pointless for him to go over as well. "Regardless of whether it's useful or not, please give it a try. If that doesn't work, we'll just inform the proprietress about it." Seeing as Xianxia was hesitant, he decided to push a little harder. "She has said that you'll get 5% of the money you collect to put towards your debt. The debt you collect from Wind and Cloud Auction House will be considered yours. There's no harm in trying." Hearing that, Xianxia decided not to turn him down as he nodded. "I'll give it a try then." An elated Bai Qi immediately filled the cup for him. "You're a good friend. Let's drink." After they were done with the meal, they walked out together. Wind and Cloud Auction House was a huge building that was located in the center of the city, which was a key location. When they arrived at the auction house, they were shocked to realize that there were many people outside the building. The shop hands from the auction house hospitably welcomed everyone into the hall while a well-dressed elderly man greeted these important guests. "What's going on?" Xianxia furrowed his brows. After giving it a thought, Bai Qi suddenly realized something. "I think they have an auction going on today." And they indeed have one scheduled for today. No wonder there are so many people. An auction? Xianxia's interest was piqued. In the past, he had entered many auction houses, but it was the first time he came across an auction in the outer universe. He wondered if there were any good treasures that were up for auction, which was why he was interested. Anyway, an auction house was a place where rich people fought against one another with their wealth. Although he had 1 million with him, it was obviously not enough for him to get anything good. Furthermore, he had a task to carry out now. "That's the shopkeeper of Wind and Cloud Auction House, Xianxia." Bai Qi pointed at the elderly man who greeted his guests at the door. Since he was here to demand repayment, he certainly had met the shopkeeper before. That was why Bai Qi could recognize this man at first glance. The first 2 times Bai Qi came here, Xianxia was still willing to meet him, but after that he refused to show up again, which made Bai Qi feel exasperated. "Let's go talk to him," Xianxia said before he and Bai Qi shuffled towards Xianxia. Presently, Xianxia was standing in front of the entrance with a smile on his face. He was from Wind and Cloud Paradise, and he was given the task to take charge of this auction house. However, their guests on this day were all important people in the city whose cultivation and status were on par with or even greater than his own. Therefore, he had to show up at the entrance to greet the guests to show that they were sincere. While he was telling a shop hand to lead a certain guest into the venue, Yun Junhua heard a firm voice coming from the side. First ins Yang Kai greets manager Yun. Yun Junhua frowned and turned his head. After he took a look at both Yang Kai and Bai Qi, a tinge of impatience flashed across his eyes. Why are you here again? Bai Qi cupped his fists. Manager Yun, please forgive me. I'm just here following orders. If you don't pay up your debt, I won't be able to complete my task. Yang Kai also cupped his fists. Manager Yun, can we get in and have a talk? There was a grim expression on Yun Jinhua's face. On any other day, he would have directly ignored these two brats. However, it was an important day for the auction house, so he couldn't make a fuss at the entrance. In light of that, he nodded his head. Go in and wait for me. This old master will meet with you soon. Then he told a shop hand to lead Yang Kai and Bai Qi into the auction house. After entering a side room, the shop hand left. Bai Qi and Yang Kai were seated across from one another. Then, Bai Qi spoke to him via divine sense. You see now? That shopkeeper doesn't have the intention to pay up at all. With a frown, Yang Kai replied, Have you clearly explained the incident to him? Bai Qi snorted. What do you mean by that? I told him all the details on my first visit, but he paid no attention to me. What could I do? Yang Kai nodded his head as he could feel Bai Qi's frustration. Judging from Yun Jinhua's attitude, it was apparent that they would have a hard time getting the repayment from Wind and Cloud Auction House. However, since they were here, they had to give it a try. Then they went on to wait for an hour, but Yun Jinhua was still nowhere to be seen. More outrageously, they were not even given tea or water. Yang Kai's face fell as time passed. Although he and Bai Qi were weak and not famous in the city, they were here as representatives of First In after all. Obviously, Yun Jinhua had no regard for them or their background. Why is he so arrogant? Just what is his status and backing? The first shop Yang Kai visited was Gathering Virtue Emporium, which was an industry of 9 stars paradise, yet the shopkeeper, Gong Sun Hong, had repaid him in full a few days ago. On the other hand, Yun Jinhua was completely arrogant and aloof. If Yang Kong hadn't already known it, he would have thought that the auction house was a business of a cave heaven. After another quarter hour, Yun Jinhua pushed the door open and entered. Seeing that, Yang Kai and Bai Qi hurriedly rose from the chairs. Without giving them a chance to speak, Yun Jinhua said, This old master has no idea what really happened regarding your inn's destruction, nor do I know whether any top cultivators from my force have anything to do with it. You've found the wrong place if you're here to demand compensation. There's an important auction going on today, so this old master doesn't have the time to hold a discussion with you. Leave. Then, he turned around and left without sparing them a glance. Right after he finished speaking, 2 men in tight-fitting clothes pushed the door open and stared coldly at them. These men exuded majestic auras as their world force undulated. It was apparent that they were open heaven realm masters. Manager Yun! Manager Yun! Bai Qi yelled and raced after him. But before he even reached the door, one of the men landed a palm on Bai Qi's shoulder, which made it impossible for him to move again. Under the man's pressure, Bai Qi slowly lowered his figure, and it seemed that he was about to kneel. Seeing that, Yang Kai narrowed his eyes and pushed out a fist. The other man charged forward and gently raised his hand to block Yang Kai's fist. With a grin, he said, How dare you make a move in Wind and Cloud Auction House? You're courting death, Yang Kai said through clenched teeth. I dare you to make a move on me then. We from First In are not so easily bullied. He was just here to demand repayment, but he hadn't expected that things would turn out this way, which was why he was furious. At the mention of First In, both of the men finally became wary. The man who was pressing his hand against Bai Qi released him, which spared him the embarrassment of kneeling. Both of you, please, one of the open heaven realm masters gestured with his hand. Bai Qi rubbed his shoulder and glared at the man who almost made him kneel. With bloodshot eyes, he said through gritted teeth, A second-order open heaven realm master? Very good. I'll remember you. When I ascend to the open heaven realm one day, I'll make you kneel and beg for my mercy. Shut your mouths and leave. Otherwise, you shall stay here forever. The man grinned, apparently unafraid. It wasn't easy to ascend to the open heaven realm. Even if one managed to fully condense the power of yin, yang, and 5 elements, they would still have to take a huge risk to split heaven and earth apart within their body. If one wasn't careful enough, they would explode into pieces. There were no second chances. Moreover, the higher the order one attempted to initially reach, the greater the risk became. Therefore, for a cultivator, it wasn't like the higher the order they were trying to achieve, the brighter their future would become. Instead, they had to assess their own capabilities and act accordingly. If one thought they could only become a 4th-order open heaven realm master, they were best off only refining 4th-order materials. If they forcefully tried to refine 5th or 6th-order materials, it wouldn't be beneficial to them. Although Yang Kai and Bai Qi were incensed, they had to make a concession. That was because these 2 men were much stronger than them, and they were in someone else's territory. Under the escort of the 2 open heaven realm cultivators, they were thrown out of the auction house through the back door. Standing on a street that was crammed with people, Bai Qi yelled, "Let's go back and look for the proprietress." Yunjin Hua had made his stance clear, so shop hands like them were unable to settle the issue. The proprietress would have to come over to deal with it. After Bai Qi finished speaking, he turned around and headed in the direction First Inn was located. Soon, though, he realized that Yang Kai wasn't following him, so he turned his head and asked, "What's wrong? Can you endure this insult?" Yang Kai shot him a glance. "I can't. That's why I'm going to look for a proprietress." Previously, he didn't want to ask the proprietress for help because that would make him look useless. However, he had no other choice now. "We don't necessarily have to look for her." Yang Kai darted his gaze around before he stared at the enormous auction house and fell into his thoughts. "Do you have an idea?" Bai Qi returned to him. It would be wonderful if Yang Kai was able to collect the debt without letting the proprietress know what had happened. With a grin, Yang Kai beckoned to him. Bai Qi approached him, whereupon Yang Kai whispered into his ear. A moment later, Bai Qi gaped at him in disbelief. "That's so wicked. If we really do that, the reputation of their auction house will be ruined." Yang Kai scoffed. "When did you become such a kind man? We were polite to them at first, but they treated us with disrespect in return. We have no choice but to use a dirty trick on them now." Still, Bai Qi was hesitant. "But we don't have the money." Before he finished his words, he suddenly realized something. Yang Kai looked around and said, "Let's not think about that for now. At the very least, we have to come up with a way to sneak into the auction house." They had just been thrown out of the place through the back door, so it was impossible for them to enter now. If they couldn't even enter the auction house, there was no point thinking about using any tricks. Things would have been easier if Yang Kai was on his own, as over the past month, he had been refining 7 faces every night. He had almost fully refined it, so he could start using it now. After summoning 7 faces and transforming into someone else, Yang Kai could easily sneak into the venue. However, since Bai Qi was around, he was unable to do that. Just when he was pondering on whether he should act on his own, Yang Kai's gaze suddenly brightened. Then, he beckoned to Bai Qi. "Come with me." There was a group of people coming over from across the street, and the one at the front was a burly man with hideous facial features. He was none other than the shopkeeper of 100 Refinings Hall, Pei Bu-wan. Recently, life had been wonderful for Pei Bu-wan. With the help of Yang Kai, he had earned close to 30 million open heaven pills. Not only was he able to pay off his debts, but he could also balance the accounts in the shop. Those from the headquarters were unable to find any problem in the books, and instead, they complimented him by saying that he was adept at running a business, so he should work harder to make greater contributions. While he was ambling forward, he was greeted by a familiar figure. With a huge grin on his face, he called out, "Young boy! Shopkeeper Pei." Yang Kai cupped his fists. "It has been a few days since we last met, and you're still so energetic." Although this thug had gone to First Inn to look for him and asked him to take part in more matches in Azura Arena, Yang Kai had decisively turned him down. After getting rejected several times, Pei Bu-wan stopped showing up. Yang Kai hadn't expected that he'd bump into him on this day. "Ha ha ha! It's all thanks to you." Pei Bu-wan patted his own belly and guffawed. "Shopkeeper Pei, there's something I need you to help me with. Will you?" Before he finished speaking, Pei Bu-wan waved his hand and said, "Just tell me what you want. I'll lend you a hand if I can do it." Yang Kai looked around and replied in a small voice, "Please come with me." There was a doubtful look on Pei Buwan's face as it seemed that Yang Kai was up to no good. With his interest piqued though, he led his group of people to follow him. After entering a back alley, Pei Buwan told his subordinates to guard the entrance before turning to look at Yang Kai. "Why are you acting so mysteriously? What's wrong?" With a grin, Yang Kai replied, "I just want to know whether you're here to take part in the auction. If that wasn't the case, nothing else needed to be said." If Pei Buwan was indeed going to enter the auction house though, Yang Kai could ask for his help to allow him to sneak in. This king is here today to take part in the auction." Pei Buwan nodded. "He really is." An ecstatic Yang Kai cupped his fists. "In that case, I'd like to ask for shopkeeper Pei's help." Pei Buwan chuckled. "Just say it. Please bring us into the auction house." Hearing that, Pei Buwan burst into a fit of laughter. "This auction house is not a restricted area. Just go in if you want to. There are 2 entrances over there. One is for important people in the Star City who have VIP invitations and the other for those who are general participants. As long as you can show them that you're wealthy enough, they will let you in. You've already made a fortune, so you totally have the right to enter." Yang Kai had realized earlier that there were 2 entrances for those who were invited and those who were not. However, that meant nothing for Yang Kai and Bai Qi because they wouldn't be allowed to get into the venue if they directly stepped into it. By following Pei Buwan though, they stood a chance of sneaking into the place. Realizing what was going on, Pei Buwan knitted his brow and examined Yang Kai. "Have you caused some kind of trouble?" With a harmless smile, Yang Kai replied, "What are you talking about? We're honest and well-behaved people, so how is it possible that we've caused any trouble?" Shopkeeper Pei is overly worried. This thug indeed didn't have any integrity to begin with. He had just promised to lend Yang Kai a hand, but he didn't immediately agree to his request. Pei Buwan's expression suggested that he didn't believe him. Left with no choice, Yang Kai said, "Good. You've always wanted me to take part in another match, right? If Shopkeeper Pei lends us a hand today, I'll follow you to Azura Arena one more time." At the mention of Azura Arena, Pei Buwan's expression changed drastically as he quickly waved his hands. "No, we're not going there again. What's going on?" Puzzled Yang Kai stared at him. Pei Buwan had visited the inn several times to persuade him to go to Azura Arena, so why did he look so terrified when this topic was brought up now? Yang Kai thought that this thug had lost a lot of money in the arena and was now worried about going back, but he had no idea that it was the proprietress who had warned him. She had seen Pei Buwan looking for Yang Kai several times, so she found a chance and had a chat with him. Upon learning that Pei Buwan had brought Yang Kai to Azura Arena, she became infuriated and almost broke his arms. Then, she warned him against taking Yang Kai to the arena again. Otherwise, she would trample his 100 refinings hall flat. If that hadn't happened, Pei Buwan wouldn't have given up this means of making more money. That was the real reason he had stopped looking for Yang Kai. With a frown, Pei Buwan pointed at 2 shop hands who had tagged along and ordered, "Take off your clothes." Although he had no idea why Yang Kai wanted to follow him into the auction house, he knew that the latter must be up to no good. After that, he stared at Yang Kai. "It's fine that you want to tag along, but we'll part ways after we get into the venue." "All right. Many thanks, Shopkeeper Pei." Yang Kai and Bai Qi traded glances and grinned. Soon, they changed into new clothes and hid among the group of people. After that, they followed Pei Buwan to shuffle towards the auction house. In front of the entrance, Yun Jinhua was nowhere in sight. He must be busy handling other matters since the auction was about to start, which allowed Yang Kai and Bai Qi to heave a sigh of relief. If Yun Jinhua was still around, they wouldn't stand a chance to get in. But now that the latter was nowhere to be found, they might be able to sneak in. Reaching the entrance, Pei Buwan presented the invitation card to the shop hand, who extended his hand to welcome them in. Pei Buwan directly strode into the venue, while Yang Kai and Bai Qi hung their heads low as they followed the rest of the group. After entering the auction hall, Yang Kai thanked Shopkeeper Pei in a small voice before he and Bai Qi scurried off in a different direction. Soon, they reached the main hall and saw many people moving around. Rows of chairs had been placed in the venue hall that was so spacious that it could accommodate at least a few hundred people. On the second floor, many private rooms were seen around the hall. The chairs in the hall were for individual bidders, while those private rooms were for people like Pei Bu-wan who had high social status. At this moment, half of the seats in the hall had been taken. Yang Kai and Bai Qi secretly observed for a while and realized that these individual bidders could take any seat they wanted, so they decided to take a seat in the last row. There was still some time before the auction began as the guests were still streaming into the venue, so an apprehensive Bai Qi asked, "Yang Kai, why don't we forget it and just watch the auction? We'd better not make a scene here." Yang Kai shot him a glance. "Do you really want to ask proprietress for help?" Bai Qi sighed. "We have no other choice. If we make a fuss here, we'll end up miserable." Yang Kai grinned. "That's only if they have the guts." A hesitant Bai Qi gave it a thought and said, "There's a problem with your idea." "What do you mean?" "What if they demand payment on the spot?" Hearing that, Yang Kai furrowed his brow as that was indeed a problem. In that case, his plan wouldn't work, but what Bai Qi had said might not be the case as well. After pondering on it for a bit, he said, "We'll see how things go. If there's a chance, we'll make a scene. If there isn't, we'll just watch the auction in silence. Everything is up to heavens now." Bai Qi clenched his teeth and said, "Good. It's decided, then. However, I think we'd better sit in different places. Otherwise, it'd be too conspicuous." Then he looked around and pointed in a direction. "You stay here and I'll go over there." After he finished speaking, he rose from his chair and walked away. Yang Kai didn't stop him. Looking around, he realized that there were many Emperor Realm cultivators as well as a few Open Heaven Realm masters in the hall. However, those were all lone low-rank Open Heaven Realm masters who basically had no future. Otherwise, they would have been invited into the private rooms instead of staying in this crammed hall. While he was looking around and observing the crowd, Yang Kai suddenly heard someone calling out to him, "Sir Yang." Yang Kai turned his head and broke into laughter. "Luo Hai?" She seemed to be looking for a seat, and seeing as there was an empty one beside a person in the back, she decided to come over. It wasn't until she got close that she realized it was Yang Kai. Having bumped into a familiar face here, she was apparently elated. Then, she took a look at the seat beside him and asked, "Is that seat taken?" "No. Have a seat." Yang Kai flashed a smile at her. It was then she took a seat beside him. There was a pleasant scent wafting from her body that could make anyone feel refreshed. "Are you here to buy something?" Yang Kai asked, thinking she was probably here to take part in the auction. Luo Hai nodded her head. "I heard that some Grand Dao pills have appeared, so I'm here to try my luck." She hadn't condensed her Dao seal yet, so she was in desperate need of Grand Dao pills. Yang Kai had heard her mention this before. Upon that realization, Yang Kai asked with a smile, "Do you have enough pills? I can lend you some if not." A bashful Luo Hai put on a smile. "I should have enough to buy 2 pills." Yang Kai nodded his head. Then, "Good luck." Through his contact with Luo Hai, he realized that she was an independent woman who did not like owing others favors. Previously, she had rejected any money that was more than what had been agreed upon beforehand, so it was apparent that she stuck to her principles. The pair were familiar with one another and had many common interests, so they had fun chatting together. 1 hour later, all the seats in the hall were finally filled. This fact alone suggested that Wind and Cloud Auction House was truly influential in the city. There wasn't even a single empty seat in the hall, which went to show that the auctions that were held here were attractive to the citizenry. Right then, a bell rang out and all the lights turned dim. Following that, a spotlight was cast on the stage. Following the movement of the spotlight, a figure sashayed forward from the backstage. Standing in the spotlight, she became the center of attention in the venue. She was a young woman in her 30s with a curvy figure and an alluring face. After reaching the podium, she introduced herself in a soft voice, an amiable smile on her face. After a typical opening speech, the auction officially began. Naturally, the things that were up for auction first were not rare treasures and were things only Emperor Realm cultivators would need. While the honored guests in the private rooms and the Open Heaven Realm masters in the hall were unfazed, the emperors fervently bid for the things and caused the prices to soar. All the items were carefully selected, so none of them were left unpurchased. Yang Kai watched coldly and realized that Bai Qi's worry was needless. The successful bidder wouldn't have to make payment on the spot. After the winning bid, the item would be taken away and payments would only be made after the auction was over. Those from the auction house were not worried that someone would refuse to pay up. Given their auction house's power and influence, who would have the guts to do that? Interesting. Xianxia grinned in silence and shot a glance at Bai Qi, who was on the other side of the hall. Bai Qi got his hint as a tinge of ferocity flashed across his eyes. It seemed that he was ready to make a scene. After an hour, 8 items had been sold off and the auctioneer had become increasingly high-spirited. The next items are the spirit pills that every Emperor Realm cultivator yearns for. Upon hearing that, Xianxia could see Luo Hai straightening up. If he wasn't mistaken, the spirit pills the auctioneer had mentioned were supposed to be Grand Dao pills. As expected, 10 maidservants with different styles of beauty emerged from backstage, each of them holding a tray on which a jade bottle sat. The auctioneer went on to say with a smile, Grand Dao pills can help a cultivator comprehend his or her own Grand Dao and condense their Dao seal. As all of you know, only by condensing a Dao seal can a cultivator stand a chance to ascend to the open heaven realm. I'm sure many emperors have gathered in this place for these Grand Dao pills, so I'll not dally. Then she pointed at the bottles behind her. We have 10 batches of Grand Dao pills here with 2 pills in every batch. We'll start the bidding for the first batch now. The starting price for the next batch will be the second highest offer of the previous batch. We'll begin now. The starting price is 5,000, with minimum additional bids of 500. As soon as she finished speaking, Xianxia heard Luo Hai yelling, 5,000. Unfortunately, many people in the hall scrambled to bid for the same item, so her voice was immediately drowned out and no one could hear her. Xianxia turned to look at Luo Hai, who appeared bashful under his gaze. Luo Hai had said that a Grand Dao pill could be bought at a price that was between 10,000 to 20,000. This price was nothing to Xianxia, but it was a hefty sum for an ordinary Emperor Realm Master. It was probably all the money a person at the bottom of the social hierarchy could earn after hundreds of years of work. Despite that, the auction price still soared from the base price of 5,000. In just 10 breaths' time, the price had broken the 10,000 mark. Luo Hai appeared anxious as she had failed in her attempt to make a bid twice. Many people were heard bidding for the Grand Dao pills, which went to show that the pills were truly popular among the emperors present. Soon, the price hit the 20,000 mark and was about to reach 30,000. A moment later, Luo Hai clenched her teeth and made an offer of 30,000. But the next instant, someone else made a higher offer, which caused her to feel dejected. Then, she stopped making any offers as she had apparently given up on this one. After all, there were 10 batches of Grand Dao pills, so she still had a chance. After the price hit the 30,000 mark, fewer people were heard bidding for the pills. It seemed that Luo Hai was right. A Grand Dao pill was worth about 10,000 to 20,000. A price of 30,000 for 2 pills had exceeded the budgets of many Emperor Realm Masters present, which was why few people bid for it now. When someone made an offer of 34,000, no one else was heard offering a higher price. The person who made the offer was a young man who was seated just in front of Xianxia. Presently, he appeared nervous as he balled up his fists and yelled at the auctioneer, "No one else is making an offer now." Bang the gavel quickly. Hearing that, the auctioneer flashed a smile at him and lifted the gavel. Then, she looked around and asked smilingly, "The highest bid for the first batch of Grand Dao pills is 34,000. Is there a higher offer?" Right then, Xianxia raised his hand, 40,000. In an instant, the cultivators around him turned their heads and gazed at him in disbelief. The young man who made an offer of 34,000 was especially fuming. Couldn't be helped. Although the price soared quickly as the emperors bid for the same item, every additional offer was only about 500 to 1,000 more than the previous price. After all, it wasn't easy for them to earn open heaven pills, so they were reluctant to offer an exorbitant price. However, Xianxia directly raised the price by 6,000, which was unprecedented. To the side, Luo Hai also turned to look at him in shock. She was aware that he had condensed his Dao seal, so Grand Dao pills were practically useless to him. Therefore, she hadn't expected that he'd bid for the pills. At that instant, she looked away and started blushing. Apparently, she had misunderstood something. This friend has offered 40,000 for the first batch of Grand Dao pills. Is there a higher offer? The auctioneer asked with a smile, and upon confirming that no one else made a new offer, she gave a 3 count and banged the gavel. The starting price for the second set is 34,000. Please make your offer now. The auctioneer extended her hand. She had mentioned before that the starting price for the next batch would be the second highest offer of the previous batch. Since the second highest offer for the first batch was 34,000, the starting price for the second batch would be the same. The auction house wouldn't want to make a loss. 34,000. The young man in front of Yang Kai clenched his fists and shouted, making the same offer as earlier. A nonchalant Yang Kai lifted his hand. 40,000. Just like the incident earlier, the same thing happened again. The young man turned his head and glared at Yang Kai, who didn't even spare him a glance. Gritting his teeth, the young man shouted, 41,000. This was the highest price he could possibly offer. He wouldn't be able to make an additional offer if someone else offered a higher price. 50,000, Yang Kai said dispassionately. You! The young man turned his head with a hideous expression. It seemed that he had the urge to bite off a piece of flesh from Yang Kai. The other Emperor Realm Masters around him appeared hostile as well. Many of them were here for the Grand Dao pills, so Yang Kai directly raising the price to such an unprecedented level would make them suffer losses as well. Some of them even suspected that he was hired by the auction house to hike up the prices. Nevertheless, this was unlikely as Wind and Cloud Auction House had a good reputation, so they probably wouldn't do such a despicable thing. Other than the young man and Yang Kai, no one else had made an offer for the second batch, so it was soon sold. Following that, it was the third batch's turn. But before the auctioneer could finish her words, Yang Kai raised his hand again. 50,000. The young man in front of him was unable to hold it in anymore, so he bellowed, "What's the point of buying so many Grand Dao pills? If your aptitude is not good enough, it's useless no matter how many pills you buy." Generally, if a cultivator was lucky enough, all it took was 1 Grand Dao pill for him or her to successfully condense a Dao seal. Most of the cultivators would need 2 pills. If the cultivator was diffident, they might need 3 to 4 pills. Any additional pills would be of no help. Yang Kai had bought 2 batches, so it was more than enough for himself. Supposedly, he didn't need to bid for the third batch. "I have too much money to spend, and it's none of your damn business what I do," Yang Kai scoffed. The young man felt his lungs almost exploding as he thought that Yang Kai was immensely detestable. If it weren't because fighting was forbidden here, he would have taught him a lesson. 51,000. Just then, someone was heard making a bid. Apparently, that person couldn't take it anymore either. Yang Kai had bought the first 2 batches, and he seemed determined to purchase even more. There were only 10 batches in total, so if all of them were bought by Yang Kai, there would be none left for them. Although the price was unreasonably high, that person still grit his teeth and made a bid for the sake of his future. Right after he finished speaking though, Yang Kai said impassively, 60,000. In an instant, gasps were heard around him. Many Emperor Realm cultivators thought that this guy must be out of his mind. They had never seen anyone offering 60,000 for 2 Grand Dao pills before. In private room A6 on the second floor, the corner of Pei Bu Wan's mouth twitched as he looked down at the hall and tutade. As expected, this brat is up to no good. Earlier, he had figured that Yang Kai must have caused some trouble, which was why the latter needed his help to get into the auction venue. Now, it seemed that this brat was trying to make a scene by bidding maliciously. However, what was the point of doing that? He would have to fork out a large amount of money in the end regardless. On the other hand, Luo Haiyi was dumbfounded as well. Initially, she thought that Yang Kai had taken part in the bidding to buy the Grand Dao pills for her, but now that didn't seem to be the case. Why had he even bid for 3 batches of pills? She speculated that Yang Kai might have some friends and family members who needed a large quantity of Grand Dao pills, and realizing that it was just her wishful thinking that he was buying the pills for her, she felt her face burning. The third batch of Grand Dao pills was sold for 60,000, and when it was time for the fourth batch, the auctioneer directly stared at Yang Kai and looked nowhere else. Unexpectedly, as soon as she finished speaking, the young man in front of Yang Kai directly said 60,000. The young man turned to stare fixedly at Yang Kai when he made the offer through clenched teeth. He seemed determined to go up against him. With a smile, Yang Kai took a glance at him and fell silent for a long time, which caused the young man's forehead to be drenched in a cold sweat. 41,000 was the highest price he could offer. The reason he even made a bid just now was to irritate Yang Kai. Just then, Yang Kai spoke to him via divine sense. "How will you end up if I don't make an offer?" Hearing that, the young man gulped and turned pale. He couldn't possibly fork out 60,000 open heaven pills. If he really had to pay up, he would become broke. By then, he could only offer up his only life-saving artifact as collateral. As their eyes met, the young man pleaded with him with his expression. 60,000 going once, going twice. The auctioneer's voice sounded like a curse from hell, which caused the young man's face to become increasingly ashen. With a faint smile, Yang Kai raised his hand at the last moment and said, 70,000. Hearing that, the young man immediately let out a long breath and became paralyzed on his chair. It was as though he had just escaped from death's door. When it was time to bid for the fifth batch, someone was heard offering a price of 70,000. Upon hearing the voice, Yang Kai became amused because that person was Bai Qi. He must be thinking that it was outrageous for Yang Kai to purchase so many pills in one go, which would attract immense hatred and attention. Therefore, he decided to help him share his burden. Yang Kai was fine with that. Since Bai Qi had made a bid, he decided to fall silent. For the remaining batches, Yang Kai and Bai Qi basically dominated the scene. The other cultivators stopped offering any bids as these two directly obtained the pills after they made a bid. Soon, all 10 batches were sold. Yang Kai had purchased 6 while Bai Qi had bought 4. The auctioneer on the stage couldn't even stop smiling. After all, a price of 70,000 for 2 Grand Dao pills was inconceivable. Normally, 2 such pills would have been sold for 30,000 at most. But the price had more than doubled now. Although such an amount of money was nothing to the auction house, they were more than happy to see such fierce competition. After this incident, the bidders would become more fervent for the next items that would be put up for auction. As expected, the price for the item after the Grand Dao pills soared quickly as well. The item was a rare defensive artifact that could block a low-rank Open Heaven Master's all-out attack, so it was definitely a life-saving treasure. Therefore, besides the Emperor Realm Masters, even the low-rank Open Heaven Masters started bidding for it as well. The competition was rather fiery. On the other hand, Yang Kai appeared calm and collected. He only started joining in the fun when the price was high enough, and after a few rounds, he defeated all his competitors and obtained the treasure for an unusually high price. At that instant, many people stared at Yang Kai with weird gazes. When they saw Yang Kai bidding for so many Grand Dao pills earlier, they thought that he was just a fool with lots of money. Now, it wasn't certain if he was really a fool or not, but he was definitely wealthy. Moreover, he hadn't even reached his limit. 1 hour later, the atmosphere in the venue became extremely awkward. Even the auctioneer on the stage had stopped smiling as she furrowed her delicate brow. That was because over 10 items had been obtained by Yang Kai and Bai Qi in the past hour. Moreover, every item was sold for a price that no one else could bid against. Could these 2 Emperor Realm Juniors really possess such immense wealth? After making some calculations, anyone would have realized that they had respectively bought over 1 million pills worth of goods. To put it in a different perspective, the average low-rank Open Heaven Realm Master wouldn't be able to take out 1 million pills even if they sold all their belongings. How did these 2 Emperor Realm Juniors possess so much money? Earlier, the young man who was almost framed by Yang Kai couldn't help turning his head to look at Yang Kai with a doubtful look on his face. Although Luo Hai had no idea why Yang Kai was madly bidding for the items, she wasn't worried at all. She was aware that he possessed 1 million Open Heaven pills that were given to him by Pei Bu Wan some time ago. The auction went on as the auctioneer said in a clear voice, "The next item is a sun's true fire. I'm sure many of you have heard that a sun star died in a particular great territory some time ago. This sun's true fire is from that dead sun star." After she finished speaking, a maidservant emerged from the backstage with a round bowl in her hands. A flame could faintly be seen flickering from the bow as a hot wave swept across the hall. Upon hearing what the auctioneer had said, Everyone in the hall broke out into a commotion. Yang Kai could also feel that many powerful divine senses shot out from the private rooms and scanned the sun's true fire. In fact, Yang Kai was surprised as well. He had never expected that a true fire from that sun star would appear here. After all, this place was quite far away from that great territory. After giving it a thought, though, he realized that it wasn't so surprising. After all, many people had obtained sun's true fires at that time. Wind and Cloud Auction House was backed by one of the 72 paradises, so they naturally had the power to obtain a sun's true fire to be put up for auction. However, a sun's true fire was at minimum a fourth-order material, while there were also fifth-order ones. It wasn't certain what order the true fire, which would be up for bidding, was in. Shopkeepers like Peibu Wan and Gong Sun Hong were only in the fourth-order open heaven realm, while there was a possibility that a fourth-order open heaven realm master could be raised using a material in the same order, which was why they paid extra attention to it. Yang Kai realized that the items that were up for auction earlier were just things that those Emperor Realm cultivators, who hadn't condensed their Dao seals, needed. The items that were up for auction now were the things that people like him craved. A fourth-order sun's true fire. The starting price is 100,000, with the minimum increase being 5,000. The auctioneer extended her hand with a smile. Following that, 7 to 8 people were heard making offers. All of them sounded eager to obtain this item, which surprised Yang Kai. He thought that only those in the private rooms would be interested in the item that was up for auction now, but he hadn't expected that those individual bidders in the hall had the money to bid for the item as well. Soon, their voices were suppressed by someone from a private room. 150,000. Hearing that, everyone in the lower hall fell silent. For a fourth-order open heaven material, 150,000 was the average price. When Yang Kai was in Seven Wonders Land, Diayu had told him that a first-order material was worth about 150 pills, while the price of a second-order material was 10 times more than that of a first-order material. And the price of a third-order material was 10 times more than that of a second-order material. The stainless golden dew he bought in Seven Wonders Land was a third-order material, which cost him 15,000 open heaven pills. However, in an auction, items were generally sold for above-average prices. If there were any wealthy people who weren't lacking money, the prices could be pushed much higher, not to mention that 150,000 was just the average price. As expected, someone else from another private room then made an offer of 160,000. The people who were seated in the private rooms were all big shots in the Star City, so it was expected that they had more than 1 million open heaven pills with them for this auction. They were all open heaven realm masters, so they didn't need the sun's true fire, but their disciples and family members could use it. It was rare for a fourth-order material to appear in an auction house, so they wouldn't want to miss it. The sun's true fire was so popular that the two guests in the private rooms soon pushed the price to the 200,000 mark. Presently, the first person in the private room had fallen silent. Apparently, the price had exceeded his limit. It wasn't that he didn't have the money. However, in order to ascend to the open heaven realm, a cultivator had to condense all 7 of the yin, yang, and 5 elements. If one material cost 200,000, all 7 materials would be 1.4 million. Furthermore, the cultivator might not even succeed in the end, so it was too hefty a price to pay. Shopkeeper-son, you have my respect. The second person from the private room was heard guffawing. Shopkeeper-son snorted and fell silent. Bang the gavel now, the person was heard saying again. With a smile, the auctioneer looked around and raised the gavel, 200,000 going once, going twice. For some reason, she subconsciously took a look at Yang Kai and wondered whether he'd make an offer at the last moment. Earlier, he and another guy had basically stolen the show. They had bought all the items that came after the Grand Dao pills, and no one else could outbid them. However, after she counted to 2, she realized that Yang Kai didn't seem to have the intention of making a bid. She smiled helplessly and wondered what was wrong with herself. Since he had bought Grand Dao pills, it suggested that he hadn't condensed his Dao seal. Therefore, it was pointless for him to buy a fourth-order material. Even though he was wealthy, he wouldn't squander his money in such a way. Right when she thought so, though, Yang Kai raised his hand and called out, 300,000. The auctioneer's gavel froze mid-air as she stared at Yang Kai in disbelief. The people in the hall also broke into a furor as well. Earlier, Yang Kai and Bai Qi practically dominated the auction, allowing no one else to bid against them. However, those items were not valuable, so only the Emperor Realm cultivators were trying to snatch them. The amount of money was nothing in the eyes of the truly rich people here. Nevertheless, this time was different. Yang Kai directly offered an increase of 100,000. Was he trying to make things difficult for himself or something? Brat, which great force are you from? The Open Heaven Realm Master, who made an offer of 200,000, was infuriated. Looking down from the private room, he found Yang Kai to be loathsome. This brat gave him a surprise at the last moment, which greatly humiliated him. Without even turning his head, Yang Kai refuted, "Make an offer if you can. If you don't have the money, shut your mouth. Which great force I'm from has nothing to do with you." The person in the private room was rendered speechless, but as a fourth-order Open Heaven Realm Master, it was inappropriate for him to bicker with a mere Emperor Realm Jr. The young man in front of Yang Kai became increasingly doubtful as he turned his head to look at him. The auctioneer became startled for a long time before she came to her senses and let out a hollow laugh. 300,000 going once, going twice, going 3 times. She banged the gavel and confirmed that the item was sold. Without stopping, she went on to say, "The next item will be a fourth-order material as well." Before she could finish her words, someone was heard making a bid from the hall, 300,000. The auctioneer became frustrated as she was at a loss for words. With a furious expression, she glared at Yang Kai and wondered what was wrong with him. He should have waited for her to finish speaking first at least, but this young man directly made an offer of 300,000 before even finding out what the material was. Could he be out of his mind? Everyone in the hall and the private rooms fell silent as they stared fixedly at Yang Kai. To his side, Luo Hai felt like she was on pins and needles. With a worried look, she said in a hushed voice, "Senior Yang, that's an exorbitant price." "It's fine." Yang Kai put on a smile. "Do you really have that much?" Just then, someone was heard speaking. It was the young man who was seated in front of Yang Kai. Presently, he was gaping at him with a sneer. "You've bid for so many items. Do you even have enough to pay up?" The reason he took part in the auction was for the Grand Dao pills. He thought he would be able to purchase 1 batch at least, but after Yang Kai messed everything up earlier, he had lost all hope. Although he was spared the trouble by Yang Kai later, he was still resentful. Upon seeing that Yang Kai unabashedly bid for so many items, he even suspected that this guy was here to stir up trouble. Unable to hold it in anymore, he decided to speak up. As long as he could prove that Yang Kai was here to make trouble, the Grand Dao pills would be put up for auction again, and he would still stand a chance. With this thought in mind, he rose from the chair and cupped his fists at the podium. "Seniors present today, I suspect that this ill-intentioned person is bidding maliciously. I urge all of you to probe him to find out whether he is really capable of paying for the items he has bid on." "I second that." Someone was heard speaking from a private room. He was the one who had lost the sun's true fire to Yang Kai. "That's a good idea. It's highly probable that this boy is here to make a scene." Someone else from a different private room was heard saying, "It wasn't that Yang Kai had offended them, but if they allowed him to keep raising a fuss, they would have no hope of getting the items they wanted. The reason they took part in the auction was to buy things they needed. Moreover, the items that would soon be put up for auction were materials that were in the 4th order and above." Therefore, after the young man finished speaking, many people in the private rooms seconded his suggestion. In room A6, the corner of Pei Bu Wan's mouth twitched. "This brat is so sinister. Why didn't I realize it before?" Now, it was apparent to him that Yang Kai was indeed here to create trouble. He wondered what grudges Yang Kai had against this auction house that the latter had to do such a thing during an auction. Yang Kai had basically humiliated them, so there was no way they would let him off. Yang Kai's real fortune would be exposed if he was probed, and although Pei Bu Wan had given him 1,000,000 pills as a reward, the things that he had bid for had exceeded that amount already. However, Pei Bu Wan wasn't worried about his safety. After all, Yang Kai was from first in. The worst that could happen was that he would be kicked out of the auction house and his reputation would be ruined. On the stage, the auctioneer appeared to be in a dilemma as she looked in a particular direction behind her. An elderly man was seated over there. Since the start of the auction, he had remained unmoving with his eyes closed. He wasn't Yun Jinhua, but he was also a mid-rank open heaven realm master from the auction house. The reason he was seated there was to prevent anyone from making a scene. Certainly, he could hear all the demands to probe Yang Kai, thus he slowly rose from the chair and walked onto the stage. Just then, someone was heard speaking from a private room. "Old you, please check this boy and find out whether he really has the capital to act so wildly." Hearing that, the elderly man furrowed his brow. They had never probed anyone during an auction in the past. After all, they were a powerful great force, so no one would have the guts to refuse making payment. All the bidders would only make offers that were within their means. However, Yang Kai's actions were indeed suspicious, so he intended to find out the truth as well. After a nod, he moved and directly appeared in front of Yang Kai. Then he slightly nodded his head at him. "Little friend, please." Yang Kai remained seated on the chairs with his hands placed on the armrests. Lifting his head, he stared at the elderly man and grinned at him. "What's wrong? Is this how you treat a guest in your auction house?" The young man turned his head and bellowed, "Stop spouting nonsense and let old you inspect you. You don't look like a man of wealth at all." If Yang Kai possessed such an immense fortune, he would have had a private room instead of sitting in the lower hall. The voice from the private room earlier was heard saying again, "Boy, stop wasting our time. If you're really here to stir up trouble, I suggest that you stop now and leave. At the very least, your reputation will be preserved. If you wait until old you makes a move, you won't be spared the punishment. Little friend, please take no offense." Old you extended his hand and stared fixedly at Yang Kai, as though he was attempting to look deep into his soul. To the side, Luo Hai turned pale and balled up her fists as she was anxious. She wasn't certain if Yang Kai could pass this inspection, but he most likely couldn't. However, she didn't have much on her. Otherwise, she could lend him some first. On the other hand, Yang Kai appeared calm and collected. Faced with a fourth-order open heaven realm master, he still sported a nonchalant smile. "Is there such a rule in the wind and cloud auction house? Why am I not aware of it?" Hearing that, old you knitted his brows. There wasn't such a rule in the past because everyone behaved themselves. However, this brat was apparently up to no good, so how did he have the gall to talk about rules? Furthermore, how dare a mere Emperor Realm Jr. act so impudently in front of him? That was the reason old you was furious and spoke forcefully. "Little friend, please cooperate. Brat, stop spouting nonsense. Scram if you don't have the money and stop embarrassing yourself." Heh. Isn't it too late for him to leave? How can he leave just like this after making a scene? Old you, it's pointless to be polite to him. Just make a move against him. Many voices were heard coming from those private rooms. Obviously, they wanted the auction house to kick Yang Kai out as quickly as possible so that the auction could go on. Yang Kai looked slightly away as his intention was indeed to make trouble in this auction house. That was because they refused to pay up and treated him disrespectfully. However, he hadn't expected to attract public outrage in the process. If he were in their shoes, though, he probably would have also thought that his actions were annoying. Therefore, despite the fact that those from the private rooms were acting spitefully, he remained unperturbed. Staring fixedly at old you, he said, "I don't mind cooperating with the inspection, but what if I do have enough to pay for the items I've bid for?" Hearing that, old you frowned. In that case, the auction will go on. Despite what he had said, he didn't believe Yang Kai possessed such an immense fortune. Everyone was required to showcase their wealth before entering the venue. If Yang Kai were so wealthy, he would have been given a private room. Barely anyone sitting in the lower hall had more than a few 100,000 open heaven pills. Yang Kai replied impassively, "What you're trying to do will stain my reputation. Do you think you can get away with it by just resuming the auction after such disrespect? What do you want then?" Old you frowned, thinking that this brat was difficult to deal with. Yang Kai sneered at him. "Don't you think you need to apologize for making a mistake?" Instantly, old you became incensed. If they weren't in the auction house, he would have let Yang Kai know the consequences of talking to him in such a manner. However, even though Yang Kai was suspected of causing trouble, he couldn't possibly make a move on a guest in his house in public. That would make him look like he was oppressing a junior, and it would greatly damage the auction house's reputation. Therefore, regardless of how infuriated he was, old you could only hold it in. Yang Kai went on to say, "I can cooperate with the inspection. If you can prove that I don't have enough capital, you are free to do as you please with me. However, if I pass the inspection, you will apologize and give me some compensation. A sharp glint flashed across Old Yu's eyes, but after giving it a thought, he nodded. Good. He's just bluffing. Does he think he can make me back down just like that? He's still too young and naive. While Old Yu was lost in his own thoughts, Xianxia suddenly put on a faint smile. Old man, I hope you won't go back on your words. After he finished speaking, he fished out a space ring and passed it to Old Yu. Old Yu hadn't expected that Xianxia would directly take out a ring for inspection, so he frowned and wondered whether this brat was really so wealthy. Doubtfully, he took the ring and scanned it with his divine sense, only for him to stiffen in place with his hand trembling so hard he nearly dropped the ring. Quickly, he composed himself and narrowed his eyes, but upon scanning the ring again, he widened them in disbelief. He almost couldn't believe his eyes as mountains of open heaven pills were sitting inside the ring, so many it was impossible to count them all immediately. No one could possibly do that in an instant as there were too many pills. Old Yu was a fourth-order open heaven realm master, and he had been in charge of the auction house for a long time now, so it wasn't like he hadn't seen transactions worth millions before. However, he really hadn't ever come across such massive mountains of open heaven pills before. How many open heaven pills were there in the ring? 100 million was the minimum, but it was likely closer to 200 million. It was no wonder that Xianxia never even batted an eye when he bid. With so many pills with him, he could have bought every item on auction today for just a small fraction of his fortune. Not to mention that the items were only worth several 10,000 to several 100,000 so far. Who is he? Why does he possess so many open heaven pills? He's still quite weak, but he has the guts to walk around with such an immense fortune. Although those from Great Battle Heaven would ensure everyone's safety in the city, isn't he worried that an accident might happen? He was flabbergasted as he became rooted to the spot with the ring in his hand. Just then, someone was heard saying from a private room, Old Yu. They were all preparing to mock and ridicule Xianxia, but Old Yu was unmoving after the inspection. Many of the open heaven realm masters were sharp-eyed, so they could see the shock behind Old Yu's gaze, and they wondered what had happened. What was it in the ring that could make a fourth-order open heaven realm master lose his composure so completely? In room 6, P198 suddenly recalled something and muttered, This brat is truly brazen. Some time ago he had given Xianxia 11 million open heaven pills, 10 million of which was the compensation for first in. He thought that Xianxia had already handed the open heaven pills over to Madame Lan, but it now seemed that it was still in his hands. It was no wonder that this brat remained calm and collected when he was required to go through this inspection. Since the beginning, the things Xianxia had bid for were worth only 2 million in total. With 11 million in possession, he didn't have to worry about anything. After giving it a thought, though, P198 realized that something was off. Even if the ring contained 11 million open heaven pills, it couldn't have made Old Yu lose his cool. Then, he recalled that he wasn't the only one who had to pay compensation to first in. There were probably a few dozen shops that respectively owed the 10 million pills. At the thought of this, P198 gasped and speculated that there were probably over 100 million pills in the ring. Although he couldn't believe it, he reckoned that his speculation was right after examining Old Yu's expression. So, Xianxia stared at Old Yu. It was only then that Old Yu came to his senses and stared at Xianxia with a conflicted gaze. After returning the ring to him, he nodded his head. This little friend indeed has the right to take part in the auction. This old master has made a mistake. Please forgive me. Xianxia put on a grin. Can the auction continue then? After a nod, Old Yu moved and appeared at the back of the stage again. It was then the auctioneer snapped back to reality and raised the gavel before shouting, 300,000 going once, going twice, going 3 times. Sold. The corners of the young man's eyes twitched as he stared at Xianxia in puzzlement. If Xianxia was so wealthy, why was he seated with the rest of the commoners in the lower hall? Seeing as Xianxia was looking smilingly at him, he hurriedly turned his head and looked down. In the young man's mind, regardless of what Xianxia's cultivation was, the latter must be backed by a powerful great force to have so many open heaven pills in his possession. The young man couldn't afford to offend him, so before the auction was over, he resolved to find a chance to flee. From that point on, the auction became boring as Xianxia became unhinged. For the following items, no one made a bid again as they were all purchased by Xianxia. It was as though the auction was specifically set up for him, and the rest of them were just there to serve as props. Since no one else would make an offer, the auctioneer was swift with banging the gavel. In just a quarter hour, over 10 fourth-order materials were bought by Xianxia. Bai Qi had fallen silent as well. Since Xianxia would do all the bidding, it wasn't necessary for him to make an offer. The next few items are the most valuable of our auction today. If anyone is interested, please make an offer. The auctioneer appeared slightly awkward on the stage. That was because only one person was heard making a bid in the entire venue for the past quarter hour, so it was meaningless for her to even act as a host. Then a maidservant went on stage and presented the item. The auctioneer said in the most enthusiastic voice she could muster, "A fifth-order sun's true fire. The reserve price is 1 million. Please make your bids." After she finished speaking, the atmosphere in the venue finally became lively again as those from the private rooms released their divine senses to scan the item. Generally, open heaven materials that were up for sale were fifth-order at best. Sixth-order materials couldn't ordinarily be bought with open heaven pills, unless one was extremely fortunate. Although these wealthy VIPs were interested in the fourth-order materials, they could do without them. However, they were determined to get their hands on a fifth-order material. Such an item was a hot cake wherever it was sold. Even the cave heavens and paradises wouldn't refuse owning more of such materials. Therefore, as soon as the auctioneer finished her words, someone yelled, 1.2 million, 1.3 million, 1.4 million. In room 6, just when Peibu Wan was about to make an offer, a familiar voice was heard again, 3 million. Rendered speechless, Peibu Wan scratched his head and cursed. This brat must be out of his mind. The average price for a fifth-order material was about 1.5 million open heaven pills. Even though the prices in an auction house were generally marked up, the maximum should be no more than 2 million. Xianxia directly offered a price that was 2 times the average price, so how were others supposed to continue bidding? He didn't seem to have the intention of allowing others to buy anything at all today. Brat, are you still not done with your nonsense? Don't go too far. An enraged voice was heard saying. That's right. Boy, aren't you worried you'll attract trouble after purchasing so many items? It's obvious that he's here to create trouble. If Xianxia hadn't ultimately won all the previous items, they would have thought that he was hired by the auction house to push up the prices. However, it was now apparent to everyone that he was here to raise a commotion. But what was the point of doing that? Although the auction house's reputation would be harmed if all their items were obtained by only one person today, he would also have to pay a hefty price. Not only was he causing damage to the other party, he was also harming himself. Old you, does this little brat really have so many open heaven pills? Someone questioned. Even the auctioneer turned to look at Old you. The things that were up for auction earlier were worth several 100,000 at most, but 3 million was 10 times more than the price of any previous item, which was why everyone was doubtful. However, Old you didn't say anything after inspecting Xianxia, so no one knew how many open heaven pills he had in possession. Faced with the stares, Old you hung his head low and remained unperturbed. Secretly, he smiled bitterly and thought that a few million was basically nothing as this brat had almost 200 million in his ring.